Chapter 228. The colorful lanterns stretched for 10 miles, and the night was bright. The river flowed under the railings, and the snow fell on them silently. The cloak blocked out all the wind and snow. The man's lips carried a faint warmth as they landed on her lips. Just like the bowl of sesame yuanxiao that she had just eaten, her lips and teeth were filled with soft sweetness. He Yen could hear her own heartbeat. In the snow, it was lively and powerful, beating again and again. His clothes were still cold from the wind and snow, but his attitude was gentle, as if he was treating the only treasure in his life. It was as if he wanted to keep this moment forever. No one would not be moved by the person in front of them. When their lips parted, He Yen felt a little nostalgic. She looked up at Xiaoju. Xiaoju looked down and helped her tidy up her hair that had been messed up by the wind. He Yen's ears were already as red as a cooked shrimp. He Yen whispered, "Xiaoju, you're not angry anymore, right?" Xiaoju sighed silently. "Su Zhiheng, it's all in the past." He Yen thought for a moment, then looked at him seriously and said, "If the past made you unhappy, I apologize to you. I don't know what other girls do when they get along with the person they like. I've been a man for far longer than I have been a woman. Xiaoju, I'll be very good to you. If you like something, I'll find a way to give it to you. If you hate something, I'll help you get rid of it. If someone bullies you, I'll definitely stand up for you. I won't lie to you or hurt you. Is this okay?" Actually, when she thought about it, even when she was with Su Zhiheng, she did not treat her lover like other girls. Of course, this was because Su Zhiheng was not a good person. However, she did not know how to treat the person she liked. When she was young in the He family, she did not know much about love. Because she wanted to be pitted by her biological parents, she deliberately tried to please them. Even when she went to the battlefield later, she hid this humility very well. However, the things that were engraved in her bones were like bones buried under the sand. When the wind blew, they would still be exposed. As a general, she learned how to control her subordinates and be decisive. She knew how to take care of people, but she did not know how to deal with more intimate relationships. Those vague feelings made her not know if what she was doing was right or wrong. Xiaoju's gaze was fixed on her. The girl was still holding the red candied hawthorn in her hand. She looked up at her eyes was full of sincerity and a little uncertain cautiousness. Xiaoju, 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 Xiaoju. There were so many people in the world, regardless of whether they were men or women. When it came to matters of love, they would cover it up in every way possible and test it out in every way possible. They were just unwilling to let others discover their true feelings. They always felt that if they said it out loud, they would lose. Only this person in front of him was frank and straightforward. He didn't use any tricks. He just said it bluntly and recklessly. It was as if he could beat a master to death with a flurry of punches. His heart couldn't help but waver. She was the only one he was attracted to. But how could Su Zhiheng bear to hurt such a person who offered his heart so clearly? He wasn't angry because of He Yan's jealousy in the past. He was more annoyed because he was angry at himself and Su Zhiheng. Just like the doe he set free in the mountains when he was young. Its wet eyes were fixed on him, full of trust and joy. However, Su Zhiheng threw away this trust like a worn-out shoe and cut it off with a knife. The better He Yen was, the more furious he felt towards Su Zhiheng. Seeing that Xiaoju did not speak, He Yen thought that he was still angry. He thought for a moment and said dejectedly, "Maybe you have a better idea. I don't know how to play zither, chess, calligraphy, or painting. Don't ask me to learn it. I won't be able to learn it. I can help you carry shirtu and chop firewood." Before she could finish her sentence, Xiaoju pulled her into her arms. You don't need to do anything for me." He Yan's head was pressed against his chin. She couldn't raise her head and couldn't see his expression. "But I don't like singing and dancing prostitutes. I don't need a servant to accompany me. No one dares to bully me. I won't touch things I don't like. If I like something, I'll buy it myself." Xiaoju lowered his head and smiled. "But then won't I become a decoration? I don't like you because I want more people to do things for me." His voice fell. It sounded like he was very far away, but also very close at the same time. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to do it for me. You really don't want anything from me? Hien asked. There had to be at least one thing, such as abiding by the law and respecting the old and loving the young. Otherwise, she could do anything. Could she cheat on him? Xiao Ju let go of her hand and looked at the crowd in the distance. He smiled and looked down at her. It's not that I don't want anything. What is it? If I keep looking at you. He reached out and grabbed Hien's hand. The girl's hand was only half his size. When it fell into his palm, it was like a small treasure. Hien, you will keep looking at me. Hien stared at him in a daze. Lady He, don't you understand what I'm saying? He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled warmly. The lanterns reflected in his eyes. There were thousands of poses and thousands of colors, but his eyes were clearly the brightest. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Someone set off fireworks in the distance. Thousands of bright lights fell into the night sky. It was a perfect night. Hien lowered his head and hid the tears that flashed through his eyes. He held his hand and smiled as he raised his head and said, "Today is your birthday. I agree to everything you said." "Xiao Ju, happy birthday," she said. "I'll keep looking at you," she replied silently in her heart. When they returned, He Yunxing and He Sui had already arrived home. Qing Mei had already told them the truth. She only said that today was Xiao Ju's birthday and that Hien had accompanied Xiao Ju to the night market. He Sui did not say anything, but He Yunxing was very unhappy. In less than half an hour, he had already walked back and forth in the house several times. When Hien and Xiao Ju returned, he looked at their interlocked hands and his expression became even worse. He Sui asked, "I heard that today is Huaijin's birthday. Have you eaten? Do you want to eat a bowl of longevity noodles here before you leave?" "We already ate," Hien said, "when we were at the night market." "You're empty-handed." He Sui noticed that Xiao Ju did not have anything on her. She looked at Hien suspiciously. "Yen, did you not prepare a birthday gift for Huaijin? This child?" He Sui smiled. "I've spoiled her too much. She doesn't know the ways of the world. Huaijin, please don't take it to heart. I'll ask her to give you a present another day." "No, Yen has already given me a present," Xiao Ju said. Hien remembered the scene at the night market. His face turned slightly red and he did not respond. He Sui did not understand what she was implying. Although he did not understand, he did not ask. He Yunsheng looked between Hien and Xiao Ju vigilantly. He was deep in thought. "It's getting late. You should go back first." Hien said, "If there's anything, I'll ask Qi Wu to look for you." Xiao Ju nodded. She said goodbye to He Sui and He Yunxing before leaving the He family's house. After Xiao Ju left, He Yunxing dragged Hien into the house. As soon as he entered the house, he closed the door and asked, "Hey, Hien, you didn't get taken advantage of when you went out with him, right?" "What advantage?" Hien knocked on his head. "You're so young. Why do you have so many ideas? Where did you learn all these from? Besides, I'm standing with Xiao Ju. Who's the one taking advantage of?" He Yunxing looked at her. "Do you think I'm so free to care about you?" Hien saw that he seemed to be worried. She sat down and poured a cup of tea for herself. "You're so worried about this?" "No." He Yunxing sighed. "Today, I heard from a few friends in the academy that the Yuto are about to enter the capital." Hien stopped drinking tea. "Who did you hear this from?" "It's spread everywhere. The emperor doesn't want to go to war. The imperial court also doesn't want to go to war. I heard that the Yuto are coming to the capital to ask for peace. This war probably won't happen." Hien looked at his expression. "Do you want to go to war?" "Of course I don't." He Yunxing answered without thinking. But if the Yuto were really willing to ask for peace, they wouldn't have caused so much trouble in Jiang, Rundu, and Huayuan. We have the upper hand now. What's wrong with giving way to the Yuto? He was still young and impetuous. He frowned and said, "If it were me, I would seize this opportunity to beat the Yuto back to their hometown. I would make sure they never dare to step foot in Dowei again." Although children were usually immature and impulsive, They also had a bit of temper. "Why are you looking at me?" He Yunxing asked. "Aren't you an official now? Do you know what's going on outside? It's not much different from what you know." He Yan didn't want to hide it from him. "Tiske," He Yunxing waved his hand. "I really don't know what the officials in the imperial court are thinking." He Yan's heart was heavy. Not to mention the grudges between her and the He family and Su Zhiheng, the conflict between Xiao Ju and Su Jingfu, and the dispute between the factions in the imperial court was not something that could be easily resolved. As Su Jingfu's power increased, the conflict between the fourth prince and the crown prince would also become more and more intense. The crown prince's virtue was not worthy of the position. If the crown prince inherited the throne in the future, it would be a disaster for the people of Dawei. However, if he let the fourth prince, then the future Shuo city would be in for a bloodbath once more. Tonight, the Chu manor was filled with joy. Chu Linfeng was holding a banquet at home. These days, the entire Chu family was preparing for Chu Zhao's marriage. Since she was Su Jingfu's daughter, there was naturally nothing that was not good. The marriage was handled by Madame Chu. However, Su Pingting sent her personal maid, Mo Tai, to frequently ask the Chu family about the marriage preparations. Even if Madame Chu wanted to do something, she could only give up because she was being watched. This marriage used up more than half of the Chu family's treasury. Su Pingting wanted to be the most glorious daughter in the Shuo capital in the past 10 years. She was the apple of Su Jingfu's eye, so everyone could only treat her well. Madame Chu naturally hated this marriage. Madame Chu's 3 sons were also jealous. The one who was most sincerely happy was probably Shi Jinbo and Chu Linfeng. At the banquet, Chu Linfeng patted Chu Zhao's shoulder and smiled. "In a month, Miss Su will enter the gates of our Chu family. I never thought that I would become in-laws with the Su family. No wonder you are my son. Amazing." To Chu Linfeng, getting a woman's favor was something to be proud of. Little did he know that this pride was especially glaring in Madame Chu's eyes. Madame Chu still had some affection for Chu Linfeng when she first married him, but this affection had long been worn away when Chu Linfeng brought concubines into the manor one by one. She knew that she was ordinary and didn't like Chu Linfeng, so she didn't ask for anything else. She just wanted to be the mistress of the family. These years she had done well. Chu Linfeng didn't have any ability other than his appearance. If it wasn't for the old madam supporting the Shi Jinbo family, the Chu family would have been ruined by Chu Linfeng. He liked beautiful women and was protective of them. However, once they really touched his interests, he would hide behind the old madam and refuse to do anything more. He was a cold and cowardly hypocrite who thought he was loyal. The blood of the men of the Chu family was probably cold-blooded, including her own 3 sons. Only Chu Zhao. Madame Chu's gaze landed on the young man beside Chu Linfeng. Chu Zhao's appearance had inherited all the good points of Chu Linfeng and Yi Runmei. He was gentle, but also had a bit of naivety and fragility. This fragility could make people let down their guard against him, and it was easy for him to win the favor of others. Su Pingting had been arrogant and domineering since she was young, but she had never said anything harsh to Chu Zhao. However, Chu Zhao was different. He wasn't as harmless as he looked. When Chu Zhao was brought back, Madame Chu didn't want him to live until he grew up. However, she didn't do anything to him for the old madam's sake. At that time, the child in front of her had also humbly fawned over her, begging for mercy like a dog. Then he quickly found Su Jingfu to back him up, and from then on his life was saved. Madame Chu couldn't find anything that could be used against him. Unknowingly, the entire Chu family had to act according to Chu Zhao's wishes. She wasn't willing to let her everything be taken away by a secret lover, so she planned to use Ying Xiang to sow discord between Chu Zhao and Su Pingting. However, Madame Chu didn't expect Chu Zhao to be so ruthless. Not only did he send Ying Xiang to the crown prince without saying a word, but he also personally sent her to the crown prince's residence in a carriage. There was no barrier between him and Su Pingting. Madame Chu felt a chill in her heart. A man who could manipulate her feelings and people's hearts at will, but had a cold heart that was even worse than his father's. He stabbed her so gently, but the person who was stabbed didn't even have the heart to complain. How terrifying was that? While she was thinking, Chu Zhao seemed to have noticed her gaze. He looked over with a smile in his eyes as usual. Madame Chu's heart trembled. She lowered her head and avoided Chu Zhao's gaze. Xylan, is there anything else that I need to prepare? Chu Linfeng asked Chu Zhao with a smile. He was getting older, and he often indulged in debauchery. His handsome appearance was long gone, but his smiling face showed some fatherly care. What does he need to prepare? Eldest Master Chu couldn't help but mock. The house is almost empty for his wedding. Do we have to sell the house for him to get married? Chu Linfeng glanced at his eldest son unhappily and said in a dissatisfied tone, If you can marry the Prime Minister's daughter, I'm willing to sell the house. Eldest Master Chu didn't speak. Their 3 sons weren't as handsome as Chu Zhao, and their literary talents weren't as outstanding as Chu Zhao's. They also didn't have a Prime Minister's husband. How could they marry the Prime Minister's daughter? Chu Linfeng had been biased since he was young. Now that Chu Zhao had a meteoric rise, he was lucky. In the future, Chu Linfeng would be even more obedient to Chu Zhao. There's nothing to prepare, Chu Zhao said lightly. It's already very good. That's the Prime Minister's daughter, Miss Su. Chu Linfeng was a little drunk and lectured him. You can't neglect her. It wasn't easy for her to take a fancy to you. You have to grab hold of her. Madame Chu looked at the scene in front of her and sneered in her heart. Listen to what he was saying. She was afraid that the madam in Yihong brothel would say the same thing when she taught her daughter to grab hold of a generous guest. Chu Linfeng had relied on women all his life to become famous. Now he had to teach his son this. If word got out, he would be the laughing stock of the entire capital. I think your father is drunk. Madame Chu didn't want to see it anymore. She stood up and said, Xylan, help your father back to the room to rest. I have a headache. I'll go sit in the room for a while. Then, she didn't care about Chu Linfeng's expression and stood up to leave. What was done couldn't be undone. She couldn't do anything now, but what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Seeing this, the other 3 young masters of the Chu family also stood up. They also didn't want to see Chu Zhao and Chu Linfeng acting like a filial father and son here, so they all left. In a moment, the lively banquet turned into a mess. People left to drink cold tea. Hey, why did they all leave? Chu Linfeng slurred, Come back. No one paid attention to him. Chu Zhao helped Chu Linfeng stand up and called for the servants to clean up the mess. He then helped Chu Linfeng back to the room. Chu Linfeng had long stopped sleeping in Madame Chu's room. The 19 concubines took turns sleeping in their rooms. Today, Chu Zhao didn't help him to the concubines' rooms. Instead, he went to the study. He wasn't a gentleman who loved books. To Chu Linfeng, the study was just a decoration. There was even a soft mattress in the room. According to the servants, it was for Chu Linfeng to have sex with his maids and concubines during the day. Chu Zhao had always turned a blind eye to his father's absurd acts. The servants were left outside the door. He helped Chu Linfeng to the mattress and Chu Linfeng lay down. He seemed to be very happy today. His face was flushed red and he was already drunk. However, he still held Chu Zhao's hand and expressed his joy. Xylan, you've really made me proud. I have 4 sons. 3 of them are not good enough. I still like you the most. I brought you to meet friends and social events when you were young because I knew that you would become my pride one day. Look, now that you're going to get married. I'm so happy. Chu Zhao sat by the mattress and looked at him silently. You're the luckiest in the younger generation of the Chu family. With the Prime Minister's help, you'll only get better and better. Not everyone can have good luck. The young man smiled sarcastically. Good luck? Was he lucky? If he didn't know who his father was when he was young and his mother was sold to a brothel and lived in fear every day, it was good luck. If he saw his mother being strangled by a servant sent by his family, it was good luck. If he lived under the same roof as his mother's murderer and didn't know if he would live to see tomorrow, it was good luck. If he couldn't even control his own life and could only be a dog under a big shot, living like a puppet, unable to even have the woman he liked, it was good luck. He, Chu Xylan, was the only one with such good luck in the world. Father, he heard his own voice, do you still remember my mother? Chu Linfeng hiccuped and said drunkenly, Your mother? Who is your mother? Then he turned over and fell asleep facing the wall. Chu Zhao looked at his face. After a while, he laughed at himself and stood up to leave the study. The servant asked him if he wanted hot tea, but he shook his head and refused. He walked slowly. When he was young, he thought the Chu family was big and that there could be dangers lurking everywhere. Now that he was older and walked around, he realized it wasn't that big. The winter in Shuo City was as cold as ever. Just like when he first came to the Chu family and saw the handsome man, he had a little bit of hope. But it was extinguished by the man's disregard and indifference. It was as cold as it was now. But now he didn't shiver like he did when he was young. It wasn't because the winter was warm, but because he was used to the cold. Anyone would get used to it. Chu Zhao walked back to his room and closed the door. In the room, an unfamiliar servant came up and said with a smile, "The wedding invitations have been sent out, fourth young master." He waved his hand and replied gently, "Thank you for the trouble." A happy smile appeared on the maidservant's face and she retreated. He was the only one left in the room. The Su family wanted to complete the wedding before the end of the year. It seemed rushed, but everyone knew that Chu Zhao would marry Su Pingting sooner or later. Everything about the wedding had already been arranged. Just like when he was young and became Su Jingfu's disciple. From that moment on, his fate was not destined to be his. The stove in the room emitted a red light. It seemed to have a false warmth. Suddenly, he remembered that on a spring day, someone gave him a brown sugar flower basket with his name on it for 8 copper coins. He suddenly missed that flower basket. A servant came in and interrupted his thoughts. He whispered, "Fourth young master, the people Prime Minister Su is looking for in the Battle of Mingshui have not been found. They have become anxious recently." Chu Zhao's gaze moved away from the burning stove. He said calmly, "Don't think too much. Those 2 people must have fallen into Xiao Huijin's hands. Miss Ying Xiang has already sent a message. His Highness the Crown Prince dotes on her very much and is quite dissatisfied with Prime Minister Su. People who think victory is in their hands naturally have a lot of resentment towards people who criticize them." Chu Zhao smiled. "Xiao Huijin has returned to the capital. The Crown Prince and Yudo have already formed a private alliance. The Su family is coming to an end." "Congratulations, fourth young master," the servant said happily. "Fourth young master's wish is about to come true. After this, you will naturally have everything you want." "What I want?" He was stunned. After a while, he said, "What I want is already someone else's." Chapter 229. When he returned, it was already late at night. Xiao Ju had just returned to his courtyard when a yellow dog excitedly pounced on him and bit the corner of his robe without letting go. He squatted down and patted the dog's head. The dog wanted a yard after getting an inch. It wagged its tail fiercely at him and bit his sleeve. Its behavior was exactly the same as its owner's. The night after the night of the He family's investigation, the yellow dog called Air Mao also ran out of the dug dog hole. Since it was raised by He Yen, he naturally couldn't lose it. However, He Rufei was crazily looking for the thief that night. He Yen was afraid that he would investigate the He family and see Air Mao, so he entrusted Air Mao to Xiao Ju. No matter how bold He Rufei was, he didn't dare to go to the Xiao family's door. Naturally, he couldn't find Air Mao. Xiao Ju could only bring Air Mao back to the Xiao family. The little girl in the courtyard called Bai Guo really liked Air Mao. She gave it a bath and combed its fur so that it didn't look like a stray dog anymore. She also used a red rope to tie the fur by its ears into 2 small bunches. Although Air Mao was obviously a male dog, Xiao Ju was playing with the dog when a voice came from behind him. "Huijin, when did you raise a dog in the family?" Xiao Ju got up and turned around. Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei were standing at the side of the courtyard and looked at him strangely. As everyone knew, the second son of the Xiao family was very particular about cleanliness. Normally, it was fine when he was in the military camp, but when he returned to the capital, he was even more picky. Xiao family didn't raise any birds. Other than the green-eared horse, there were no other animals in the family. This dog looked like an ordinary dog from a farmer's family. Its fur was yellow with a little bit of black. It shouldn't be anything valuable. Xiao Ju looked down at Air Mao. Air Mao was barking noiselessly at him. I helped someone raise it. Who would ask you to help raise a dog? Xiao Jing laughed. That's too much. Bai Rongwei nudged Xiao Jing with her elbow and smiled. In Shuo City, only Miss He can get Huijin to help take care of a dog. Xiao Jing came to a sudden realization and looked at Xiao Ju with a gratified gaze. This younger brother of hers had always been overly cold and unreasonable towards women, but now it seemed that he was quite good at pleasing women. During the day, Bai Rongwei had already prepared a birthday banquet for Xiao Ju. She also knew that he was going to accompany He Yen to the night market tonight. There were many delicacies in the night market, so there was no food left for Xiao Ju tonight. Big brother and sister-in-law, why are you still waiting for me so late? Xiao Ju asked. What's the matter? Xiao Jing approached him and looked at Air Mao, who was playing in the snow in the courtyard. She smiled and said, do you know that 4th young Master Chu from Count Shijin's residence is going to marry Miss Su next month? Xiao Ju absent-mindedly nodded. You and 4th young Master Chu were both granted a marriage by His Majesty. Xiao Jing said, now that 4th young Master Chu's wedding date has been set, your sister-in-law and I would like to ask, when do you plan to set the date for your marriage? Xiao Ju was slightly startled. Your big brother and I have already talked to Master He. Master He said that as long as Miss He likes it, he doesn't mind. Miss He is a girl after all, so I can't ask too much. Bai Rongwei looked at Xiao Ju. You are usually with Miss He. Have you ever mentioned this to her? Xiao family was very open-minded. When Xiao Zhongwu and Madame Xiao were still alive, Xiao Jing wanted to marry Bai Rongwei, who was a concubine's daughter. Madame Xiao didn't agree, but in the end, she went along with Xiao Jing's wishes. Now that Xiao Zhongwu and his wife were no longer alive, Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei wouldn't interfere with Xiao Ju's marriage decision. It was all up to Xiao Ju. I plan to get married after the new year. Xiao Ju said. Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. They thought that it would take another year or so, but they didn't expect Xiao Ju to decide so quickly. This was good. It seemed that Xiao Ju liked Miss He more than they thought. Since it's like this, I'll give your birth characters to Master tomorrow and let him choose a good day for you. We also need to discuss with Master He what to do next. Don't worry about the betrothal gift, Ruby and I have already prepared it for you. Bai Rongwei's smile was full of genuine happiness. She took Xiao Jing's hand and said, Ruby and I will go and ask someone to send the invitation to Master. Huijin, you've been tired today. Go back to your room and rest. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Xiao Ju nodded, and Bai Rongwei left with Xiao Jing, satisfied. Xiao Ju stared at their backs until Air Mao came over to tug at his boots again. Only then did he regain his senses. In the past, he only felt that the yard was empty and cold. Now, with the addition of a small dog, a mute dog that didn't know how to bark, it suddenly became lively. He lowered his head and smiled. He didn't go back to his room, but turned and walked towards the ancestral hall. In the Xiao family's ancestral hall, Xiao Zhongwu and his wife's memorial tablets were placed at the front. Xiao Ju walked to the side and took out an incense stick from the shrine and lit it. Niao niao, smoke rose into the air. Xiao Ju's face was hidden behind the smoke, and his expression was diluted. As long as he returned to Shuajing, he would often come to the ancestral hall. When there was thunder, when there was worship, when he was bored. He wasn't a person who liked to talk. In life, there were too few people he could talk to. Everyone had their own difficulties, so there was no need to share them with others. The most difficult time was when he was scolded by the scholars behind his back during the Battle of Gua City. When he returned to his residence, he only went to the ancestral hall to light 3 incense sticks. After the 3 incense sticks were lit, everything returned to normal. There were many things in the world that needed many years to experience bit by bit. When he was young, he had seen everything and found everything boring. In fact, he yearned for the sights of the world, but the sights of the world avoided him. So what if he was young and successful? So what if he was the son of an aristocratic family? Everyone thought of him as the moon high up in the sky. In fact, the moon was just a lonely youth. He had friends, and then his friends betrayed him. He also looked forward to his family, and then his family left him. His most unrestrained youth was just a few short years, and the only candy left in his life was given to the people who sought death on the road. All these years, he had been alone and left nothing behind. Until one day, a smiling girl barged into his life and told him, "I like the moon, but the moon doesn't know." He had never been so sure of one thing before. Xiao Ju raised his eyes and looked at the memorial tablet behind the smoke. "Father, mother." His voice was calm, as if he was saying an unshakable oath. "I like someone. I want to take her as my wife." In one of the courtyards of the He residence, the sound of intense coughing could be heard. The servant girl who was sleeping in the outer room of the courtyard was turned over by the noise and said in a daze, "Second madam is coughing again, quickly go and take a look." "I'm not going." Another servant girl turned over and said impatiently, "Even second master doesn't care, why should we be meddlesome? It'll be better in the daytime. If you want to go, you go." "It's so cold, I'm not going." The servant girl covered her head with the quilt. "I'll pretend that I didn't hear it." The coughing continued outside, and after a while, as if it was deliberately suppressed, a few muffled groans could be heard. "Second madam," he struggled to get up, and her throat and eyes were in pain as if it was burned by fire. The handkerchief in her hand was already covered in blood. She struggled to breathe, and after a long while, she fumbled for the lamp. He Yuanliang hadn't come to her courtyard for a long time. To be precise, it was after the incident at Yu Hua Temple, when she was grounded in the He residence, and He Yuanliang refused to come to see her again. In fact, second madam, he had already expected this. Her husband was a villain, a cowardly and greedy villain. Now, he was even more afraid of offending He Rufei, so he hurriedly drew a clear line with her, even if she was his first wife. First wife, second madam, he smiled sarcastically. So what if she was his first wife? He could be so cruel to his biological daughter, so his first wife, who was not related by blood, was no different from a stranger to him. Second madam, he looked at the flickering flame in the oil lamp. She was the eldest daughter of the first wife in the family. That year, her father decided to marry He Yuanliang, because he saw that the He family still had a place among the nobles in the Shuo capital. In her original family, the marriage of a daughter was to pave the way for the career of her father and brother. She didn't expect that it would be the same when she married into the He family. Unfortunately, she was unlucky and gave birth to 2 daughters, so of course, her children became the sacrifices of the He family. Second madam, he hated He Rufei for being cruel and merciless, hated He Yuanxing and his wife for coming up with the idea of exchanging children, hated He Yuanliang for being a coward and incompetent, and most of the time, she hated herself. She hated herself for not being able to change everything. If she could give birth to a son, perhaps with a son, He Yuanxing would not be so arrogant. But she didn't, so she couldn't protect He Yen and He Xining. There was a knock on the door. Second madam, he said, "Come in." It was a little girl who came in. She didn't look familiar. Second madam, he asked, "Who are you?" "This servant is called Cui Luo, the maid who sweeps the yard." Cui Luo replied respectfully, holding a pot of hot water in her hand. This servant went outside to get some hot water. "Second madam, drink some water to avoid coughing." She went to the table, picked up a teacup, poured a cup of water and handed it to second madam He. The water was just right, it was not hot. Second madam, he took a sip, and the tingling in her throat suddenly felt better. She said, "Thank you." Cui Luo lowered her head and said softly, "This is what this servant should do. If second madam needs this servant's help, please let me know. In my yard, everyone has already treated me as if I don't exist." Second madam, he smiled bitterly, "Why bother you? This servant's master is second madam He, so I naturally have to listen to second madam's orders." Cui Luo's voice did not change. Second madam, he was slightly stunned, and couldn't help but seriously look at the servant in front of her. The maidservants of the He family were strictly disciplined by He Yuanxing and his wife. In the past, they were quite lively, but now, because of their fear of He Rufei, they had become dull. The servants were always trembling with fear, but this servant girl stood there, neither servile nor overbearing. She looked at second madam He without any respect, as if she was an ordinary person. Second madam He's heart moved, and she asked tentatively, Can you really help me with anything? Second madam, please tell me. Can you find a doctor for me? Chui Luo was silent for a moment, then said, I'm afraid I can't right now, but this servant can bring some pills back for second madam. Second madam, he suddenly understood something. She sat forward a little and lowered her voice. You're not someone from the He residence. Who is your master? Chui Luo looked at second madam He with some surprise. Lord Fei Nu said that he wanted her to sneak into the He family to secretly take care of second madam He, and she really did that. These days, second madam He didn't have any status in the He family, and the servant girls didn't put her in their eyes. He Yuanliang never took the initiative to come to see her when she was seriously ill, and he also didn't call a doctor for her. Just like tonight, if Chui Luo didn't come into the room, second madam He could only cough until dawn. Chui Luo always thought that second madam He was a somewhat weak and incompetent ordinary woman. Now that she heard her words, she knew that second madam He was smart and insightful. Chui Luo didn't speak. Is your master General Fengyun? Second madam He asked in a low voice. Chui Luo was even more surprised. Madam He laughed. She laughed for a while and her expression became serious again. She said, I know what your master wants to do. Go back and tell him that I can help him. However, as the price of the deal, he must protect my daughter, He Xining. Chui Luo was silent for a while and didn't say anything. She only put the hot water bottle on the table and said softly, If madam has any orders, call this servant. Then she closed the door and left. Second madam He looked at the hot tea on the table, and no one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she swallowed the sweet taste in her throat and lay down again. The night passed, and early the next morning, Fei Nu brought back the news of the He family. In the study, Xiao Ju frowned. A deal? Second madam He said so. Fei Nu replied. When Chui Luo came back with the news, Fei Nu was also surprised. He didn't know whether to admire this woman's courage or say something else. He Rufei and second young miss He exchanged identities. Second young miss He is the real General Fei Hong, and second young miss He should be aware of this. Fei Nu said, He Rufei might be using He Xining to threaten second madam He, which is why second madam He doesn't dare to tell the truth. With second madam He's help, the secret of the He family should be easy to uncover. Speaking of this, Fei Nu sighed in his heart. Who would have thought that General Fei Hong, who made the Chang people tremble in fear on the battlefield, was actually a woman? And second madam He and second master He were so cold-hearted that they would let a girl bear such a heavy fate, and get rid of her after she became famous. They, the Nine Flags Battalion, had seen all kinds of cruelty on the battlefield, but when they knew the truth, they couldn't help but feel pity for General Fei Hong. Even if a famous general of a generation died, he should die with a bang on the battlefield, instead of being killed in an ordinary backyard by someone with a sinister trick. Second madam He only mentioned He Xining? Xiao Ju asked. Fei Nu nodded. Yes. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes. I understand. Young master, then, let Chui Luo tell second madam He. Xiao Ju looked out the window. I will make this deal. On the first day of the 12th month, Wu Tuo's envoy, Meninbu, entered the capital. Emperor Wen Xian summoned the Wu Tuo envoy to the throne room. In Qin Lan Palace, Concubine Lan was leaning on a soft couch, watching a palace-made brew tea. Concubine Lan was not young anymore. There were new beauties entering the harem every year, but she was the only one who was favored by His Majesty. Everyone said that Concubine Lan had such good luck. Not only was she favored by the emperor, but she also gave birth to a virtuous and talented son. However, her temperament was not competitive. Not to mention that she was suppressed by the empress. Even noble lady Ni dared to be arrogant in front of her. However, ever since Emperor Wen Xian gave 5th Prince Guangji to Concubine Lan to raise, noble lady Ni had restrained herself a lot. 5th Prince Guangji was young. Although noble lady Ni repeatedly warned him that Concubine Lan was not a good person, Guangji felt that Concubine Lan was much gentler than his biological mother. He had never argued with Concubine Lan. It was the same today. Guangji ran in from outside, and the old mama behind him hurriedly said, 5th Prince, run slowly. Be careful not to fall. Mother. Guangji ran to concubine Lan's side and said with a smile, "Today, the Yuto emissaries entered the palace. Imperial father summoned them in the hall. I heard that the Yuto sent many gifts, such as ivory as half a person's height and white peacocks. Mother, this son wants to see them." Concubine Lan smiled and patted the snow off his clothes. "If you want to go, then go. Won't mother come with me?" Guangji asked. "I won't be going," noble consort Lan said with a smile. "Just let Chang Mama take you there." The fifth prince was young and only wanted to see the white peacocks. When he heard this, he said, "Okay, this son will go now. After seeing them, this son will tell mother about them." Chang Mama took the fifth prince's hand and left. Concubine Lan smiled and shook her head. "He's still like a child. Fifth younger brother is young." A voice sounded from outside the door. "It's normal for him to be a little childish." The palace maid behind her hurriedly said, "This servant greets the fourth prince." The fourth prince Guang Shuo stepped in. Noble consort Lan was beautiful and delicate, while the fourth prince took after his mother. He was bright and handsome. Compared to Crown Prince Guang Yen, who was always indulging in sensual pleasures, he seemed much more amiable and reliable. Concubine Lan saw the Guang Shuo and immediately smiled. She pulled him to sit in front of the stove and had a palace maid pour hot tea for the Guang Shuo. She said, "What brings you here today?" "Imperial father is meeting the Yuto emissaries in the hall. The crown prince is also there, so this son came to see mother." The Guang Shuo smiled. Concubine Lan smiled but didn't say anything. "Mother also knows about the Yuto emissaries, right?" Concubine Lan's expression was no longer as relaxed as when she had faced Guangji. She sighed. "I know. Imperial father is willing to meet the emissaries, which means that he is willing to accept the Yuto's request for peace." The Guang Shuo's smile also faded. "That's fine. After the battle of Jiang and the Rundu, the Yuto won't dare to act rashly. But if Imperial father agrees to let them open a market in Dawei, the consequences will be unimaginable." Concubine Lan looked outside. "Everyone else, leave." Yugue closed the door. The palace maids all left and Yugue closed the door. Concubine Lan looked at the Guang Shuo. "Have you ever said these words in front of your imperial father?" The Guang Shuo shook his head. Imperial father never talks about these things with me." Emperor Wenxuan liked the fourth prince because the fourth prince was like Concubine Lan. Concubine Lan's literary talent was outstanding, her temperament was gentle, and she didn't fight for anything. In the depths of the palace, she was like the last piece of pure land in the emperor's heart that could not be sullied. Even though Empress Zhang didn't like Concubine Lan still lived well in the depths of the palace for so many years. Because she didn't make mistakes, the emperor also protected her. This pity and respect for Concubine Lan also extended to the Guang Shuo. Guang Shuo was the same. No matter how much the courtiers encouraged him to compete with the crown prince for the position, the Guang Shuo remained unmoved. When he was with Emperor Wenxuan, most of the time, they talked about poetic and picturesque matters. Politics and the country should be the crown prince's concern. If he overstepped his boundaries, the emperor would dislike him. "Guang Shuo." Concubine Lan looked at him and suddenly said, "Do you want to compete?" Guang Shuo paused. "Do you want to compete for the position?" Concubine Lan repeated. As if the secret in his heart had been exposed, Guang Shuo awkwardly avoided Concubine Lan's gaze. "Ken doesn't dare. I only asked if you want to, not if you dare." In the eyes of the usually gentle woman, there was a never-before-seen determination and unfamiliar coldness. Guang Shuo was stared at by those eyes and couldn't help but say, "I do." After a while, he composed himself and said, "I do. Mother, the crown prince doesn't deserve to be the crown prince. He only knows how to eat, drink, and play. Yuto and him must have private dealings. If there were other virtuous and talented brothers in the palace, I would also support him. But right now, there is no one else. If one day Guang Yen sits in that position, no one knows what Dawei will be like in the future. Perhaps, Dawei won't even exist." When he finished speaking, there was an extreme silence in the palace, as if shocked by his rebellious words. Concubine Lan sighed softly. All these years, this consort has never thought of anything else. It wasn't my wish to enter the palace. Since I've already entered, I will live well. This consort doesn't care what happens to Yudo, or what happens to His Majesty. This consort doesn't even care what happens to Do Wei in the future. She looked at Guang Shuo and reached out to touch Guang Shuo's face. A gentle smile appeared in her eyes. In this palace, Guang Shuo, this consort only cares about you. If the Guang Yan becomes the emperor, you and I, mother and son, will have no way to survive. Her voice was soft as she said the cruelest words. This consort has lived for most of her life. It doesn't matter whether I die or not. But you can't. Guang Shuo. She smiled. You are so intelligent, gentle, and so young. How can you die at the hands of this kind of person? This consort definitely won't allow it. Guang Shuo looked at the woman who had straightened up from the couch. Her eyes were still as elegant and dignified as before. With just one movement, her aura had completely changed. A wave of emotions suddenly surged in his heart. It was as if the impulse that had been accumulating for a long time was about to burst out. Mother, this consort already has His Majesty's favor. You also have the love of the courtiers and the people. But just these two things aren't enough. He Rufei has already been bribed to fight for this position. You must obtain Xiao Huaijin, she said. Chapter 230. In the throne room, Wu Tuo's envoy, Meninbu, stood respectfully to the side, waiting for his attendants to present gifts to the Dawei emperor. A pomegranate tree made of gold, a pair of white peacocks, 2 ivory tusks, and a glowing shirtu the size of a fist. Emperor Wenxuan looked at the gifts with great interest and satisfaction. This is the sincerity of the Wu Tuo people towards your majesty. Meninbu bowed respectfully to Emperor Wenxuan. Emperor Wenxuan felt extremely pleased. Back then, the previous emperor had several sons. He was the most mediocre one, but because he was the eldest son and the crown prince, the previous emperor passed the throne to him. After Emperor Wenxuan succeeded the throne, he was just like when he was young. He had no achievements in politics. If not for Su Jingfu's help, he might not even have been able to sit on the throne. After so many years, he had gone from being ambitious to having to admit that he was just an ordinary person. Later on, he felt that there was nothing wrong with being an ordinary person. From the time he sat on the throne until now, he had finally done something good and displayed the might of the Dawei. This was a merit that would be recorded in the annals of history. Your Wu Tuo kingdom was waiting for an opportunity to invade the Dawei's territory. How can this little compensation count? Emperor Wenxuan said in a low voice. Meninbu lowered his head in fear. Your Majesty, this is all a misunderstanding. The Wu Tuo kingdom is weak and cannot be compared to the Dawei. Even if the Wu Tuo kingdom was 100 times more courageous, they would not dare to invade. However, it is all in the past. There is no point in talking about it now. Not only these gifts, Your Majesty also requests that I present an apology gift to Your Majesty. He looked at Emperor Wenxuan. It is to allow the merchants of the Wu Tuo kingdom to open markets in the Dawei. Emperor Wenxuan frowned. Opening markets in the Dawei's territory is clearly beneficial to you. How can it be an apology gift? How cunning of the Wu Tuo. The crown prince stood to the side and said, Father, why don't we listen to what he has to say? Meninbu knelt down. Your Majesty, the people of Wu Tuo have no intention of invading Dawei. Opening a market would only be beneficial to Dawei. Does Your Majesty remember the historical records of the previous dynasty's wise ruler? He once sent an envoy to the West Moon Kingdom to open a market and learn the art of horse husbandry from the West Moon Kingdom. Later on, the country's war horses were illustrious and the cavalry was valiant. He paused for a moment. The people of Yuchuo are poor. If we can open a market in Dawei, we can trade with Dawei, and the people of Yuchuo will no longer have to live in poverty like before. Furthermore, the Utopia Kingdom is willing to offer 50% of the harvest from the market to Your Majesty. Meningu's flattery only made Emperor Wenxuandi feel comfortable and not moved. However, Meningbu's last sentence was exactly what the emperor wanted to hear. One had to know that the state treasury had been empty for the past few years. Because of the war between Hua Yuan and the Rundu, they had used up a lot of money. Raising an army required a lot of money. Why did Emperor Wenshuan accept the Utopia Kingdom's request for peace? Other than his dislike of war, it was also because he was embarrassingly short of money. After fighting a war, who knew how long it would take to recuperate? Moreover, without money, how could they fight a war? Now that they had opened a market, they could receive 50% of the profits every year. Dawei was so big, and there were many merchants in the Utopia Kingdom, it sounded like a good deal. Emperor Wenshuan subconsciously looked at Su Jingfu beside him. He still trusted Su Jingfu. If not for Su Jingfu's support back then, he would not have been able to sit in this position so steadily for so many years. Su Jingfu only stood at the side with a smile and did not say anything. Emperor Wenshuan immediately understood and said, "We can accept the request for peace. However, setting up a market is a very important matter. We are the Emperor of Dawei, and we cannot casually reply to you. Let us think about it carefully before we give an answer." Meningbu was not disappointed. He knelt down gratefully and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your kindness." The Utopia Kingdom's emissary behind him also knelt down and shouted, "Long live the Emperor." Emperor Wenshuan was in a very good mood, but the Crown Prince's expression was somewhat ugly. He glanced at Su Jingfu with unconcealable malice in his eyes. After the Utopia Kingdom's emissary left, only Su Jingfu and the Emperor were left in the hall. The eunuchs beside him helped Emperor Wenshuan to the back of the hall. Emperor Wenshuan asked, "Prime Minister Su, what do you think about setting up a market in Dawei? Although Meningbu is willing to give 50% of the profits to Your Majesty, this old subject thinks that we should not jump to conclusions." Su Jingfu said, "In the current confrontation with Yudo, Dawei has the upper hand. We cannot be led by the nose by Yudo. Moreover, they are offering 50% now, but Yudo is very cunning. When the time comes, if they hide the profits, it will be difficult for Your Majesty to verify everything. Therefore, now is not the time." When Emperor Wenshuan heard this, he also felt that Su Jingfu's words made sense. He nodded and sighed. "Prime Minister Su, the only person who can share my burdens is you. We believe in you." Su Jingfu smiled. "Sharing Your Majesty's burdens is the responsibility of a subject. This old subject should do so. I am willing to sacrifice my life for Your Majesty." When the Crown Prince returned to his residence, he was so angry that he kicked over the table in front of him. The servants around him were shocked and immediately knelt down. No one dared to step forward. Only a red-clothed servant walked out. Ignoring the Crown Prince's rage, she walked to his side and said gently, "Your Highness, why did you lose your temper the moment you returned to your residence? Did you meet an annoying person outside?" The Guangyan looked at the beauty beside him. In the entire residence, when everyone was afraid of him, only this woman was fearless and walked over as usual. However, this fearlessness did not make him dislike her. Instead, it made him feel that she was sincerely concerned about him. "I met an annoying person." The Crown Prince held Ying Xiang and walked into the hall. As he walked, he said, "Prime Minister Su, that old bastard, dared to ruin my plans." He sat down in front of the couch and casually poured himself a cup of wine to calm his anger. Ying Xiang leaned into his arms and smiled. "Why is it Prime Minister Su again? Recently, just by listening to this servant, Prime Minister Su has already made Your Highness unhappy for several days." "You're right," Guang Yen snorted. "That old fart is now taking advantage of his old age to meddle in this consort's affairs. In this consort's opinion, it won't be long before he will also meddle in this consort's affairs. I think God thinks that he's too meddlesome and wants him to have no descendants in this life." These malicious words made Ying Xiang giggle. She reached out her slender jade-like hand and took the cup of wine from the Crown Prince's hand. She took a sip and smiled sweetly. "Of course. With Your Highness like this, you will have many children in the future." "What are you hinting at?" The Guang Yen pinched her face. The beauty smiled and avoided him. The anger in his heart unknowingly turned into lust. Just as he was about to pull her over and kiss her, someone outside said, "Your Highness, someone wants to see you." "Who is it?" The Guangyan's spirits were dampened and he said impatiently, "Wu Tuo's envoy, Mr. Moningbu." The crown prince was startled. He put down his wine cup and waved his hand. "Let him in." Ying Xiang also stood up. She tidied her dress and stood beside the crown prince. Moningbu walked in. He had the appearance of a typical Yudo. He was short and stout, and looked honest and amiable. However, when his eyes moved, he looked cunning. He walked to the crown prince's side with a smile and bowed. "Your Highness, we meet again." When the crown prince saw Moningbu, his irritation in the hall was aroused. He only said, "Sit." Moningbu sat down opposite the crown prince. "You've seen the opening of the market," the Guangyan said. "It's not that I don't want to help you. I've already done my best." Moningbu was still smiling, and there wasn't the slightest hint of annoyance on his face. "Your Highness has already agreed with the king to help the Wu Tuo kingdom open a market in the Great Way, and the Wu Tuo kingdom will naturally help your Highness obtain everything your Highness wants. Could it be?" He said unhurriedly, "Your Highness has already given up on that position?" "Nonsense." The Guangyan said angrily. "What do you know? Currently, there are many people in Dawei who secretly support the fourth prince. The crown prince and General Fengyun have a grudge against each other. The Dawei emperor favors the fourth prince. No matter how you look at it, your Highness is at a disadvantage." The crown prince gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. Although he was the crown prince, as long as Emperor Wenxuan didn't issue an edict to pass down the throne, he wouldn't be able to sit comfortably as the crown prince. Originally, he had chased Xiao Huijin out of Shuajing with great difficulty. However, he hadn't expected that the Battle of Jiang would allow him to regain his reputation. How could he be willing to let that coward, the Guang Shui, sit on the throne? "This isn't because of your Highness," Ying Xiang muttered. "It's clearly because of Prime Minister Su. Our Highness is also very willing to help the Yudo kingdom open a market in Dawei." Moningbu couldn't help but raise his head to look at the person who spoke. He couldn't help but be stunned by the beauty of this servant. However, he quickly recovered from his daze and said, "Prime Minister Su? Prime Minister Su has been obstructing us recently. It was because of him that news of the Battle of Jiang was leaked." "Your Highness," Moningbu said with a smile, "are you sure that Prime Minister Su is on your side?" "What do you mean?" the Guangyan asked cautiously. "Nothing," Moningbu said with a smile. "I just think that Prime Minister Su is a smart person. Xiao Zhongwu was killed by Prime Minister Su. Since he is a smart person, he would never reveal his trump card in front of others. On what basis does your Highness believe that Prime Minister Su's display of support for your Highness means that he truly supports your Highness? Don't try to sow discord between my relationship with Prime Minister Su." The Guangyan sneered. "Cunning Yudo, why would I fall for your trick? It's fine if your Highness doesn't believe me," Moningbu said with a smile. "However, I still have to say one more thing. If your Highness is just unwilling to part with Prime Minister Su's connections and doesn't care too much about Prime Minister Su himself, then you don't have to be so troubled." Moningbu said softly, "Shuo Jing in Dawei and Su Jingfu aren't the only people who can help your Highness. Just like how Xiao Zhongwu can be replaced by Xiao Huijin, Su Jingfu can also be replaced by someone younger. With the same methods and connections, a young eagle is easier to train than an adult poisonous snake, isn't it?" The Guangyan looked at him thoughtfully, but Moningbu laughed loudly and stood up. "Your Highness, you don't have to give me an answer so quickly. In a few days, when His Majesty hosts a banquet to welcome Ambassador Yudo, it won't be too late to give me an answer then." He ordered the attendant behind him, "I'll go back first. In a few days, I'll listen to your Highness' good news." Moningbu left. Only Ying Xiang and the Guangyan were left in the hall. The Guangyan's expression was uncertain as he thought about Moningbu's words. Although he had righteously expressed that he would not sow discord because of Moningbu's words, in his heart, there was still a trace of wavering. Su Xiang was a smart man. Recently, he had frequently disagreed with him on the matter of the Wu Tuo. He clearly knew that if he didn't do as the Wu Tuo said, he might lose everything, but he still acted willfully regardless of his position. He had originally thought that the older he got, the more unreliable he became, but now, the Guangyan was not so sure. Could it be that Prime Minister Su had been bought over by Guangyan a long time ago? The He family was bustling these days. Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing came to visit again a few days ago. They were talking about the marriage between He Yen and Xiao Ju. As everyone knew, at the celebration banquet, His Majesty had bestowed a marriage between Chu Zhao and Su Pingting, and He Yen and Xiao Ju. Chu Zhao and Su Pingting were going to be married next month. After Bai Rongwei asked an expert to calculate the wedding date of Xiao Ju and He Yen, 2 dates were set. One was the 7th day of the new year, and the other was the 10th day of the new year. Both were auspicious dates for marriage. He Yen was not in the Fu. Although he was an official without any real power, he still had to do things every day, even though they were all miscellaneous things. When He Yunxing heard Bai Rongwei's words, he immediately frowned and said, "Then wouldn't there only be a month to prepare? Isn't it too rushed?" He Sui was originally very happy, but when she heard He Yunxing say this, she also felt that it was a bit inappropriate. "Second young master, he does not need to worry," Bai Rongwei said with a smile. "Ruby and I have already started preparing for Huaijin's marriage 2 or 3 years ago. However, Huaijin, this child, has never liked a girl. Even if we prepared, we could only put it aside. Now that His Majesty has bestowed a marriage, and Huaijin likes Miss He very much, there is no need to delay. Tomorrow, I will have the Fu send over the list of betrothal gifts." 2 or 3 years ago? He Yunxing was still doubtful. "You don't even know who Military Governor Xiao likes? How can you prepare the betrothal gifts?" This time, it was Xiao Jing who spoke. Xiao Jing said seriously, "In the Xiao family, marriage does not depend on family status. As long as it is a girl that Huaijin likes, it will definitely be the best. Therefore, the betrothal gifts will definitely not be small." Yunxing is not good with words. "Eldest young Master Xiao, please do not take offense." He Sui glared at He Yunxing. "We are not complaining about the betrothal gifts. Yen Yen is my daughter. My wife passed away early, so I raised Yen Yen. Although our family is not rich, Yen Yen has been pampered since she was young. I don't care about other things, but—" He looked at Bai Rongwei, and his usually easygoing and honest face became more serious. "The person my daughter marries will definitely love and dote on her, just like how I treat her. The betrothal gifts are for others to see. Yunxing and I don't spend much money on normal days, so I don't care. What I care about is the life Yen Yen will have after she enters the Xiao family." He smiled. "I am a rough man, and I don't know how to speak. I know that the Xiao family has an extraordinary status in Dawei, and it is our family who is climbing up the social ladder. However, I am not boasting, but in the whole of Dawei, my daughter is also unique. Just want to know." His tone was unusually sharp. "After Yen Yen enters the Fu, will Military Governor Xiao still take in concubines? If he does, I don't mind waiting a year or 2 before marrying my daughter off. If he doesn't, I don't have any objections." He Yunxing looked at his father in surprise. He had always looked down on He Sui's good attitude towards the Xiao family, and always felt that he was rushing to climb up the social ladder. Even if the emperor granted the marriage, He Yen was a girl, so of course she had to be more reserved. If the emperor felt that the He family was easy to manipulate, then wouldn't He Yen be in a tight spot in the future? Not to mention these rich families, even if they lived in the alleys of ordinary people like him, they would hear rumors of the husband's family bullying the new daughter-in-law every now and then. He thought that He Sui would go along with Grandma Zhao's words and quickly agree to He Yen and Xiao Ju's marriage, but he didn't expect He Sui's question to be so sharp. Their family was poor, and He Sui married. Even after his wife died, he never thought about remarrying or taking in concubines. This was natural. He Yunxing didn't think there was anything wrong with it, but this was the case for poor families. It wasn't easy to support one more person. But it was different for rich families. Ever since He Yunxing went to school, many of his well-off classmates more or less had a few concubines in their manners. This was the case for rich families, not to mention the children of noble families. He Yunxing had thought about this before, but every time he thought about it he deliberately avoided it. Because the emperor's marriage was unchangeable, and the world was like this. It was normal for rich and powerful families to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. What? Yunsheng almost jumped up. Didn't you just say that you trust the 2 brothers? You said it so confidently that I really believed it. I didn't grow up with them. I only heard about them from others. How do I know if they are telling the truth? Distance tests a horse's strength, and time reveals a person's heart. I've only met them a few times. Do you think I can read minds? He scolded. Then I just want a guarantee from them. Xiao family also knows that although our family is poor and not a government official's family, we are not easy to bully. If Yen is wronged in their family, I will make them suffer even if I have to risk my life. Come on, Yunsheng didn't believe it. Even if we risk our lives together, we can't do anything to them. He slapped him on the head. Why do you always praise others and diminish your own prestige? When can you learn from your sister? Learn from what? Learn from her and smile when she sees Military Governor Xiao? Yunsheng sneered. Besides, if Military Governor Xiao really wants to take a concubine in the future, we will be so anxious here. Maybe Yen, that idiot, won't even care about it and will stupidly help count the money. She won't. What? Lowered his head and smiled. Yen won't. This child looks very arrogant and willful, but her heart is not bad. Sometimes she can be a little stubborn. Xiao Ruby said that once his brother has set his mind on something, he won't look at anything else. Yen is the same, Yunsheng said nostalgically. When we were young, I took her to the market to pick out dresses. If she liked the prettiest one, she would definitely get that one. Even if we gave her something more expensive or better, she wouldn't want it. I said those words just to scare the Xiao family. If Yen really wants to marry, I won't stop her. I can tell that Yen likes Xiao Huijin. The way she looks at Xiao Huijin is the same way your mother looked at me back then. Yunsheng was moved by Sui's words at first, but when he heard the last sentence, he immediately stopped being moved. He gritted his teeth and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Besides, don't talk about how stubborn Yen is. Didn't she like that fan guy so much before? She doesn't even mention him now." There was one more thing that Yunsheng didn't dare to say. When Fan Cheng died, Yen was as calm as an ant on the roadside. She didn't even shed a tear. Sui said, "How can that be the same? That fan guy isn't human." Yunsheng. Chapter 231. When Yen returned to the Fu, it was already very late at night. Yunsheng told her that Bai Rongwei had come to the Fu. When Yen heard that they had even calculated an auspicious date, she couldn't help but be startled. After the new year? Yes. Yunsheng looked at her expression. Do you also think it's too rushed? Not really, Yen replied. It's just that there have been a lot of things to do in the imperial court recently. Wu Tuo's envoy just arrived in the capital today, so the next 2 months will be very busy. Xiao Ju and I won't have time to prepare for the wedding. Yunsheng frowned. Don't you think it's too fast? It's okay, Yen said. His Majesty has bestowed a marriage, so she has to get married sooner or later. What does it matter? It's still your marriage. Yunsheng felt a headache coming on. Can you at least be a little more careful? Yen felt that there was no need to do more. When she got married in her previous life, she also returned to the capital and got married not long after exchanging identities with Rufei. Time was tight, but everything in the He family had already been arranged. From the dowry to the wedding dress, she didn't worry about it at all. She didn't know if other women were like this when they got married, but in her memory, marriage was just a matter of moving from one family to another. Sui scolded Yunsheng. Your sister knows what she's doing. What are you worrying about? Then she looked at Yen and asked, Yen, when Madame Xiao came over today, she said that the betrothal gifts have already been prepared. Since you have an official position, after you marry into the He family, you don't have to worry about it in the morning and at night, just like before. As for your dowry, Father has already prepared some for you. Of course, our family can't compare to the Xiao family, but you don't have to be ashamed or upset about it. When our daughter marries over, she will have her own salary every month. Isn't it better than a dowry? But there's one last thing. He Sui scratched his head. You've been in Liangzhou for so long, but you haven't embroidered your wedding dress. Now that you are married, it will be too late to embroider by yourself. In Shuojing City, there are many excellent embroiderers. Whichever one you like, I will invite her to make your wedding dress. She should be able to make it in time. That shouldn't be cheap, right? He Yan asked. My daughter is getting married. Of course, I want the best. He Sui said carelessly, I have plenty of money. I don't lack money. He Yan said, as for the wedding dress, I have my own plans. Father, don't worry about it. But, it's my own marriage. Of course, I'll make my own decisions. He Yan stood up. Father, are you going to choose a wedding dress for your daughter? I didn't mean that. He Sui hurriedly said, but when he saw He Yan's gaze, he was defeated. Forget it as long as you think it's good. However, when you've chosen an embroiderer, you must tell father so that father can invite one for you. I know. He Yan looked outside. It's getting late. Father, you and Yunxing should go to bed early. After freshening up, Qing Mei came into the room to take away a basin of hot water. She said, if the auspicious date is set, you will get married after the new year. Why do you not look nervous? Getting married is not going to the battlefield. He Yan laughed. What's there to be nervous about? You are too careless. Qing Mei muttered. What about the wedding dress? Have you ever thought about what you would look like when you put on your wedding dress and married Governor Xiao? He Yan was slightly stunned. In her previous life, when she married Su Zhiheng, the wedding dress that the He family prepared for her was actually quite gorgeous and exquisite. However, when He Yan looked at herself in the mirror, she always felt a little uncomfortable. The scars under the exquisite dress would always be seen by others. What she had to accept was the unknown future of living in a strange mansion as a woman. Even though she was looking forward to it, there was actually fear in the depths of her heart. But now, she was no longer afraid of getting married. Perhaps it was because Xiao Ju had promised her that even after she married into the Xiao family, she would not have to sacrifice anything and be her true self. When Qing Mei saw that He Yan did not speak, she thought that He Yan was finally shy. She smiled with relief and went out with the basin of hot water. He Yan was startled by the sound of the door closing. She came back to her senses and lay down on the bed. Suddenly, she remembered something and took out the black jade with a snake pattern from her inner clothes. Under the night lights, the black jade emitted a cold and gentle warmth. After giving this jade to her, He Yan tied it around her waist and was afraid that it would fall off, so she found a string and hung it around her neck like a necklace. A beautiful wedding dress would definitely cost a lot of money. He Sui and He Yunxing were already struggling to make ends meet because of her marriage. If she took this piece of jade to the embroidery workshop, would they allow her to buy it on credit for Xiao Ju's sake? However, if the news of her buying a wedding dress on credit spread, not only would her face be tarnished, but Xiao Ju's face would also be tarnished. It was still not possible. He Yan put the jade back into her clothes and turned over. Since ancient times, getting married was indeed a matter of spending money. At night, in the empty hall on the mountain, 2 wooden tigers were lying in front of the hall. They were so quiet that they seemed to be asleep. A gray-feathered pigeon flapped its wings and landed in front of the small table. It blinked its black bean-like eyes and pecked at the red wild fruit on the porcelain plate on the table. A slender hand reached over and took off the copper pipe that was tied to the pigeon's leg. After a moment, the copper pipe fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Someone yawned and asked in a daze, "What's wrong?" The person who spoke had a white and round face. His eyes were squeezed into slits by his flesh, but they were not greasy and disgusting. On the contrary, he looked a little funny and amiable. If He Yan was here, she would recognize that this person was Xiao Ju's master, Lu Daichuan, who was good at forging swords. Hey, Lu Daichuan saw the gray-feathered pigeon and was surprised. There's a letter. Who is it from? Who else could it be? It's your precious disciple. The woman with the letter turned around and revealed a charming face. This woman was about 30 to 40 years old. Her appearance was not considered beautiful, What was beautiful was the flirtatious look between her brows. Her eyes were very charming, but her lips were very thin. She appeared restrained and cold. This bit of contradiction was very well mixed together by her. In the end, only an indescribable immortal charm was left. She had such a face, but she wore coarse linen clothes. Her hair was loosely tied up with a branch. She looked like a mountain ghost in the legends. Huaijin sent a letter? Lu Daichuan was surprised. Why did he suddenly send a letter? The beautiful woman sneered. Of course he sent someone to do it. Do you think he came to say hello and show filial piety to us? Of course I know he sent someone to do it. Lu Daichuan smiled. What's the matter this time? This guy is going to get married after the end of the year. His honorable wife still lacks a wedding dress, so I'll have to trouble you to embroider one for him. As the beautiful woman spoke, her anger soared to the sky. Is this some kind of embroidery workshop? He ordered me to do it without hesitation. Oh, don't be angry. Lu Daichuan poured her a cup of tea. After all, our Miss Ru Xing used to be the best embroidery girl in Dawei. Ru Xing was not moved by his flattery. You are already so old. Don't call me miss. What embroidery girl? It was so many years ago. You still remember? Lu Daichuan blinked. Of course I remember. After you went up the mountain, many people looked for you. Your legend is still in the Shuo capital. Lu Daichuan said, your embroidery skills are so good that you can't find a better one. Huaijin came to you for help because of this. I've never seen a disciple who can order their master around so smoothly. Ru Xing glared at him. Among us, you spoiled him the most. You spoiled him the most. You spoiled him the way he is now. Lu Daichuan was innocent. The five of us are his masters. How can you say that I caused all this? Besides, Ru Xing, do you really think that I spoiled him back then? Ru Xing glared at him and didn't say anything. Of course not. When Xiao Ju went up the mountain, he was very young. When he came down the mountain at the age of 14, he was still a teenager. But in the 10 years in between, there was not a single day that was easy. Xiao Zhongwu knew that he would have to carry the Xiao family's future on his shoulders. It would be a lonely and difficult road. He asked the five of them to teach and train Xiao Ju in the strictest way. Only by enduring what ordinary people couldn't endure could one achieve what ordinary people couldn't. The world said that Xiao Zhongwu was very lucky. The eldest young master was already so outstanding, but the second young master was even better. If it weren't for his cold temperament, he would be better than all the men in Dawei. But no one knew what Xiao Ju had been like during those years on the mountain. It was definitely not a pleasure. The masters were all human beings, not real gods. They all had 7 emotions and 6 desires. Sometimes when they saw that the little child was really pitiful, they couldn't help but feel sorry for him, but they couldn't show it. After a long time, Xiao Ju didn't have a deep attachment to his masters. Since he left the mountain, he didn't have much contact with them except for going up the mountain once a year. Lu Daichuan understood. Who would be nice to a person who had tortured, beaten, and scolded him since he was a child, and threw him into the array for no reason? Xiao Ju didn't come back for revenge. It was already very good of him. That's good. Lu Daichuan put his hands together. I was worried that after staying on the mountain for so long, he would become cold and unsociable. I was worried that he would be single for the rest of his life. Now I'm relieved. If he didn't get married because of us, it would be a big sin. That's good, Amitabha. Ru Xing rolled his eyes. What about that girl? Lu Daichuan, what do you mean? Haven't you seen that girl? Ru Xing asked impatiently. That girl from the Shen family has been chasing that bastard for so many years, but he didn't fall in love with her. But he fell in love with that girl and even asked me to embroider a wedding dress for her. I want to know what's so special about that girl. He stroked his hair. Is she as beautiful as me? Lu Daichuan laughed. She's only 17 or 18 years old. She's in her prime. You're already half a foot into the ground. How can you compare? You haven't been beaten for a long time, right? Ru Xing smiled. I'm joking. Lu Daichuan coughed. I think that girl is very nice. You should trust Huaijin's taste. A man's taste can't be taken seriously. Ru Xing said disdainfully. You have to trust Jian's taste. Lu Daichuan smiled. Huijin's autumn sword likes her very much. What? That day, she came to help Huijin get the repaired autumn drinker sword. When the sword was in her hands, I could feel that the autumn drinker sword liked her. I've been on the mountain for many years. I've seen more swords than people. Autumn's sword takes after its master. If Autumn's sword likes Miss He, she must be good. After a long silence, Ru Xing said, maybe that sword has been on the battlefield for a long time and its mind is not clear. That's not interesting. Lu Daichuan said, do you know what you're like now? You're like an evil mother-in-law who is dissatisfied with the bride. Who are you calling an evil mother-in-law? Ru Xing looked at him with murderous eyes. I'm saying you should relax. Lu Daichuan said, Huijin is better at judging people than you and me. Since he likes Miss He, we should support him as his elders. As for Huijin, although he usually treats us coldly, you know very well why we've been safe and sound on the mountain for so many years without any disturbances. Ru Xing did not speak. Now that he can get married and start a family, General Shao did not entrust him to us in vain. Lu Daichuan sighed. The wind in the hall was cold, reminding them of the nights on the mountain. The young boy practiced with a cold face and grew up in the blink of an eye. Ru Xing was silent for a while, then got up and walked out. Lu Daichuan stopped her. Hey, where are you going? Of course I'm going back. Ru Xing gritted his teeth. To embroider a wedding dress for your damned disciple. I've taught a debt collector. It took me a lot of effort to send him down the mountain. Now that he's about to get married, he comes back to make trouble for me. She's the best embroiderer in Dawei. Lu Daichuan smiled and said, the wedding dress she embroidered is the best in the world. Of course. Ru Xing's voice had a hint of a smile. I hope that girl is worthy of my skills. He Yen did not know that Xiao Ju had asked her master to embroider a wedding dress for him. Bai Rongwei sent someone to tell him that Xiao Ju was already preparing the wedding dress. He Sui and He Yunxing were still a bit uncomfortable. How could a woman's wedding dress be prepared by her husband's family? He Yen felt that Xiao Ju was very considerate. He knew that she was not good at this kind of thing, so he took care of it himself. She was happy and relaxed. The wedding date was set for the 10th day of the new year. Xiao family's wedding invitations had been sent out. Everyone in Shuajing knew about it. The He clan didn't have that many relatives and friends. At most, they were just a few good friends that He Sui had when he was still a commandant. He Sui felt that there were not many people coming to watch the wedding. These days, he had been worried. He Yen did not think that it was a big deal. Getting married was not going to fight. The more people, the better. Moreover, she did not want to be stared at like a monkey. She put the wedding matter aside for the time being. There were more important things at hand. The Wu Tuo messengers finally entered the capital that winter. On the first day of their arrival, Emperor Wenxian accepted their apology and the wish for peace brought by the Wu Tuo messengers. He Yen was not surprised when he heard the news. However, he did not expect it to be so soon. Emperor Wenxian's heart was biased towards peace. This was not a good thing for her and Xiao Ju. He Yunxing sat in front of He Yen and asked her, in 3 days, His Majesty will be holding a banquet at the Heavenly Star stage. Those Yudo will definitely use this opportunity to disgust you. Can you bear it? I have to bear it even if I can't. He Yen smiled bitterly. Your sister's position is not so high that I can ignore His Majesty's orders. The banquet at the Heavenly Star stage was to show the Dawei's power and to let the Yudo see Dawei's wealth and power. However, He Yen was a general. He could not accept standing with the enemy who had killed the people of Dawei. He did not want to see those despicable Yudo strutting around in Dawei's territory. Do you think, He Yunxing paused, will His Majesty allow them to open a market in Dawei? Now that the news had spread throughout the capital, it was no secret that He Yunxing knew about it. He Yen would occasionally tell He Yunxing about the current situation in the imperial court. In her opinion, He Yunxing would most likely become an official in the future, regardless of whether he pursued a civil or military career. There was no harm in letting him know about these things in advance. He Yen shook his head. I don't know. She had asked Xiao Ju about this before, but Xiao Ju had only said that Emperor Wenxuan had not agreed yet. However, no one knew what would happen in the future. Sigh. He Yunxing sighed heavily. Those Yudo have killed so many people in Dawei. If we still let them in to do business, what would those people think? What would the soldiers who died at the hands of the Yudo think? He wanted to say something, but that person was the emperor. How could he allow him to interfere? He could only swallow his words. However, there was disappointment in his eyes. He Yunxing was not the only one who was disappointed. He Yen knew very well that Emperor Wenxuan had agreed to the Yudo's request for peace at this juncture. This was also a slap to Xiao Ju's face. So what if they were General Fengyun? No matter how brave and invincible they were, and how they won a complete victory in the Battle of Jiang, as long as they gained the favor of the emperor, they could still swagger into the land of Great Wei, and even enjoy the convenience and benefits that the merchants of Great Wei could not enjoy. How ironic. However, sometimes when one thought that they were clever, they would only shoot themselves in the foot with Shirtu. If everything went smoothly and the Wu Tua kingdom and Dawei turned hostility into friendship, it would be beneficial to He Rufei, Su Jingfu, Su Zhiheng, and even the Wu Tua kingdom's ruler who was thousands of miles away. However, it would not benefit the people of Dawei, Xiaoju, or He Yen at all. Therefore, he could not let the blood of the soldiers who had died in vain. He had to let Emperor Wenxuan be wary of these cunning Yudo and see their true colors. At the Heavenly Star platform 3 days later, He Yen lowered his eyes. At that time, there would be a real show to watch. Chapter 232. 3 days later, Emperor Wenxian hosted a banquet at the Heavenly Star stage. The Heavenly Star stage was located on a high platform in front of the palace. Further ahead was the ceremonial stage. Yudo's envoy, Mainin Bu, had entered the capital. His Majesty had agreed to Yudo's request for reparations. On the surface, it was to show the magnanimity of the Dawei's ruler, but in reality, it was to show the prestige of his country. This was He Yan's first time attending such an event. Early in the morning, she changed into an official's robe. It was red with flowers and a black belt in the middle. She was not as tall as a man, so the robe was slightly oversized. However, because of her tall stature, it looked elegant in the robe. Now that everyone in the imperial court knew that she was a woman, she did not need to disguise herself as a man. Qing Mei only lightly drew her eyebrows and applied a thin layer of powder. Her lips were soft and pink, so she did not use any lipstick. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail. It was neat and tidy. He Yen looked at the woman in the mirror. She was handsome and elegant. She did not disguise herself as a man, nor was she overly delicate. This was the most pleasing to her eyes since her rebirth. He Yen took a sip of tea from the table and said, "It's almost time. I'll go out first." Qing Mei asked, "Miss, do you really not want this servant to accompany you?" "I'm not going to a banquet. Why would I bring you along?" He Yen laughed. "You can wait for me in the residence." She left the door and got into the carriage. Xiao Ju did not come to pick him up today. Although they were going to get married soon, before they were married, He Yen was still Marquis Wu and before he became Xiao Ju's fiancé. He had to be clear about business and private matters. It was better not to be too casual on such an occasion. She did not have any servants by her side. It was rare for someone to go to the Heavenly Star stage alone like her. The carriage had been arranged yesterday. When they arrived near the Heavenly Star stage, He Yen got off the carriage and walked towards the Heavenly Star stage alone. There were already some officials who had arrived first. Those who knew each other exchanged greetings and reminisced about the past. He Yen didn't know many people. As he stood there, suddenly someone's excited voice sounded, "Sister He." He Yen was stunned. He turned around and saw Lin Shuanghe running over. He Yen was also dressed very formally today. If he didn't speak, he would look like a talented young man in the imperial court. He Yen asked curiously, "Brother Lin, why are you here? Isn't it said that only officials can be here?" "My grandfather and father are both here," Lin Shuanghe said disapprovingly. "The Empress Dowager likes me, so she let me come and join in the fun." Young Master Lin came in through the back door again. Lin Shuanghe looked at He Yan from head to toe, his eyes sparkling. Younger sister He, this is the first time I've seen you in your official uniform. Beautiful. Our Huaijin is really lucky to have found such an outstanding beauty as his wife. This person always praised without thinking, regardless of whether the other person could accept it or not. He Yan interrupted his flattery. I haven't seen Brother Lin in a long time. What has Brother Lin been busy with? Don't say any more, Lin Shuanghe said with a bitter face. I've only left Shuajing for a year and a half, but there have been a lot of women coming to Shuajing to find me. Ever since I came back, I've been seeing patients every day. Did Sister He not notice that I'm so tired that I've lost weight? He Yan saw his energetic appearance and said, That's not true. If you don't want to see a doctor, you can just close the door and not see them. Why force yourself like this? They're all women, Lin Shuanghe said seriously. A gentleman should have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He Yan was speechless for a while, then said, So that's why Brother Lin is so busy. That's why he completely forgot about helping me find a house. Lin Shuanghe was stunned for a moment. He finally remembered something that he had long forgotten. He looked at He Yan strangely. But aren't you and Huaijin getting married on the 10th of the year? Why are you buying another house? It's not for me to live in. He Yan was helpless. I want Father and Yunsheng to change houses. In the past, she had no choice but to be poor. Now, she had a proper official position. The money that Xiaoju gave her last time was enough to build a new house in the capital. Although it wasn't as luxurious as a rich family's house, it was still much better than the one in front of her. He Yan thought about it. She would just treat it as borrowing Xiaoju's house. After a year, she would pay him back. So it's for uncle and younger brother. Lin Shuanghe sighed in relief and patted He Yan's shoulder. Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. I promise to help you settle it properly. He Yan, didn't you say that you're too busy to deal with this matter? Ahem, I have time. I can squeeze in a little. So you deliberately didn't help me find a house before. Younger sister He, how can you think of me like that? As they were talking and laughing, Lin Shuanghe suddenly waved behind He Yan. Huaijin. He Yan turned around and saw Xiaoju and Xiaojing walking over from the other side. The two brothers had outstanding looks. Walking among the young officials, they were like cranes in a flock of chickens. When they got closer, He Yan bowed to Xiaojing. Xiaojing smiled and said, This is the first time I've come to the Heavenly Star platform with a female official. Miss He is valiant and valiant. Women don't lose out to men. He Yan replied courteously. Lin Shuanghe rubbed his chin and looked at He Yan and Xiaoju for a while. He said, I have to say, the two of you look really compatible. He Yan looked at Xiaoju. He was also wearing his official robe today. Coincidentally, the embroidered flower on his dark blue official robe matched the one on her official robe. There was also a belt around his waist. It made him look especially handsome and elegant. Younger sister He, Lin Shuanghe said, Say, if you get promoted a few more times, you can go to court with Huaijin. It's really convenient. In the whole of Dawei, this is the first time the two of you are married. Miss He is not married yet. Xiaojing said softly, Young Master Lin, please be careful with your words. If others hear you, it will damage Miss He's reputation. He Yan looked at Xiaojing. Everyone said that young Master Xiao was a gentle and polite gentleman. Now that he had seen it for himself, he had to be so calculative over such a small matter. However, when he said it, it didn't sound pedantic. Instead, it felt that he was thoughtful. No wonder Song Taotao wanted to be Xiaoju's sister-in-law. After all, it was hard to find someone like Xiaojing in Dawei. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, a person suddenly appeared in front of her and blocked her view of Xiaojing without revealing anything. He Yan looked up and met Xiaoju's gaze. She seemed a little unhappy. He Yan was quite protective of his elder brother. Was he afraid that he would have designs on Xiaojing? At this moment, someone called out Lin Shuanghe's name. It was probably Lin Shuanghe's friend. Lin Shuanghe followed the voice. Xiaojing also walked a few steps forward and started talking with her colleagues. He Yan finally had some time to be alone with Xiaoju. She moved closer to Xiaoju, opened her sleeves and asked, "What do you think? This is the new official uniform. It's my first time wearing it. Isn't it very romantic and full of murderous aura?" The sun shone on the girl's face, making her fine eyelashes look even more distinct. Her eyes were bright and spirited, and when she smiled, there was a pure youthful spirit. The red official's robe made her look even more heroic, and it was a valiant aura that was completely different from other girls. There were millions of girls in the world. She was the only one who was different. Xiao Ju turned around and looked away. He Yan saw her like this and pulled back her sleeves. She moved closer and asked, "Isn't it? I don't see any murderous aura." Xiao Ju couldn't stand her pestering and looked down at her. Her eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. She purposely made her angry. "You're so silly." He Yan gritted her teeth. "Why can't you say something nice?" She turned around and pretended to leave. However, when she turned around, she bumped into someone and almost fell into his arms. Chu Zhao stood in front of her and looked at her. "Miss He." Fourth young Master Chu. Xiao Ju pulled He Yan back to her side. Chu Zhao first looked at Xiao Ju, then his eyes fell on He Yan. He still had that familiar gentle smile. "I already know about Miss He's happy news. I congratulate you in advance." "Same to you." He Yan smiled. "I also wish fourth young Master Chu and Miss Su a happy marriage." Chu Zhao heard this and his eyes trembled slightly. He seemed a little sad, but he still saluted He Yan and walked away. He Yan looked at his back and felt that it was especially bleak. She couldn't help but say to Xiao Ju, "Xiao Ju, don't you think that fourth young Master Chu is quite pitiful?" Xiao Ju said coldly, "I don't think so." "How can that be?" "I think that He Yan said softly, "Maybe he doesn't like Miss Su. People's eyes can't lie. His gaze is very strange. When the marriage was mentioned, he didn't seem happy at all. He even seemed very sad. You're quite observant. After all, I was blind once before. Of course I have to observe people more carefully now. Unfortunately, the imperial edict has been issued. He can only do this. Do you think he..." He Yan turned around and saw that Xiao Ju had already walked a distance away. She quickly chased after her. "Xiao Ju, wait for me." After a while. "Xiao Ju, are you angry?" "No." The officials stood in the square on the Heavenly Star stage. He Yan's position was not enough to stand next to Xiao Ju. However, in the group of people she was with, most of them thought that she was Xiao Ju's fiancée and did not dare to do anything to her. Because she was small and afraid that she would not be able to see the scene on the stage, the first row was specially reserved for He Yan. He Yan stood at the very front and looked at the emperor on the stage. On the high seat, Emperor Wen Xian smiled as he looked at the officials below the stage. The officials were dressed in official robes and stood neatly. Just from their appearance, they looked very dignified. It was said that the Wu Tuo kingdom was surrounded by mountains and there were very few plains. The palaces were not even half as big as Dewey's palaces. It seemed that every time they held a sacrificial ceremony, the scene would be very shabby. He was old. Although he did not have much achievements in politics, he still hoped to leave behind one or two praiseworthy achievements. Unfortunately, after so many years, he did not. Since ancient times, the emperors either had a good reputation or a bad reputation. He did not want to have a good reputation. Even Emperor Wen Xian did not have the guts to face the saliva of his descendants. Therefore, ever since he ascended the throne, he had never done anything like building large buildings and temples. Only today's banquet on the Heavenly Star stage allowed him to regain some of his pride as an emperor. The princes sat on one side of the stage. Fifth Prince Guangji was still young. When he saw a beautiful pastry, he wanted to grab it, but he was stopped by Guang Shua. Guang Shua said softly, "Fifth brother, sit properly. You represent Dewey's face." Guang Ji pursed his lips, but he behaved himself and did not dare to take the pastry again. Guang Yan glanced at the two of them, his eyes full of contempt. Since when Xuandi had set up a banquet on the Heavenly Star platform, he had expressed his sincerity in accepting the Wu Tuo kingdom's request for peace. He was not in a hurry to open a market. He could plan it slowly in the future. As long as he could obtain Yudo's help and eliminate Xiao Huijin, the fourth prince and that bitch concubine Lan would be his prisoners sooner or later. He really couldn't wait to ascend to that position. The Wu Tuo envoy, Ma Ningbu, stepped forward and knelt in front of Emperor Wen Xian. He praised the emperor's benevolence and broad-mindedness. He was shocked by the prosperity and beauty of Dawei. In the future, the Wu Tuo kingdom was willing to be on good terms with Dawei and even respect Dawei. Emperor Wen Xuandi was very pleased to hear that. Among the officials below the stage, there were those who were as proud as the crown prince. There were also those who had righteous indignation written all over their faces like Wei Xianzhang. Most of them were angry but did not dare to say anything. Everyone said that the current Dawei's imperial court was no longer surnamed Song, but Su. If that was the case, then that was fine. But what was with allowing outsiders to come to the Heavenly Star platform openly? Since when had the Great Wei fallen to such a state? Among the generals, He Rufei stood at the front with a relaxed expression. There was no hatred in his eyes when he looked at Yudo. On the other hand, Yan He's eyes were filled with anger. His hands were already clenched into fists. If not for the fact that they were on the Heavenly Star stage and the emperor was present, he might have rushed up to beat Ma Ningbu up. Xiao Ju stood beside him. Yan He could not help but whisper, "What is this shorty talking about? Who is he trying to fool? The Wu Tuo kingdom wants to be on good terms with Dawei? I will go to the Wu Tuo kingdom and kill 10,000 of their citizens first. Moreover, will their king believe that Dawei is willing to be on good terms with the Wu Tuo kingdom?" Seeing that Xiao Ju did not reply, Yan He was even angrier. He turned his head and mocked, "Aren't you General Fengyan? Are you going to watch Yudo behave so atrociously in the Heavenly Star stage?" Xiao Ju calmly said, "Aren't you the Lieutenant General of Guida? If you want to teach them a lesson, why don't you do it yourself?" Yan He was speechless. He snorted and did not speak. On the other side, Emperor Wen Xian accepted the flattery and gifts from the Wu Tuo kingdom's emissary. Ma Ningbu said, "The warriors of the Wu Tuo kingdom are best at wrestling. They usually perform wrestling competitions for the king during ceremonies and banquets. Today, they are willing to perform for your majesty." Yan He said, showing off in front of an expert. Actually, Emperor Wen Xian himself did not really like these things. After he ascended the throne, the imperial court emphasized civil matters more than military matters. However, since the emissary of the Wu Tuo kingdom suggested it himself, he could not reject it to show Dawei's magnanimity. Thus, he calmly waved his hand. "Allow." Ma Ningbu turned around. Two burly men walked out from the group of Yudo's emissaries. These two men looked different from the short stature of the Wu Tuo kingdom. They were exceptionally tall and muscular. Their hair was tied into a thin braid behind their heads. Ma Ningbu said, "Your Majesty, these are the two best warriors of the Wu Tuo kingdom, Nada Duo and Hu Yunmu. They are willing to perform for your Majesty." The two burly Wu Tuo men walked to the empty space in the middle of the square and took off their outer clothes. In the cold weather, they were bare-chested. After shouting twice, they hugged each other and wrestled. He Yen stood among the officials and heard the officials behind him whispering, "This is indeed a barbarian land. The way they hugged each other is too indecent. Very indecent." He Yen did not feel that it was indecent. He only felt that this wrestling was actually a competition of skill and not brute force. Bystanders only saw them hugging each other and trying to wrestle each other. In reality, it was not the case. Tripping, back wrestling, mentality, and speed were all things that needed to be paid attention to. These two Yuto were indeed not to be underestimated. This wrestling match took a long time to determine the winner. Dawei's officials and the emperor were actually bored out of their minds. This was because the match was not exciting enough. After the match, they had to go against their conscience and praise them. Emperor Wen Xian rewarded the two warriors with a plate of silver each. After Ma Ningbu expressed his gratitude, he said, "I heard that Dawei's army is filled with talents and has more warriors than the Wu Tuo kingdom. Since all of you are here today, would your Majesty be so kind as to broaden the horizons of the Wu Tuo warriors?" Was this a competition? Emperor Wen Xian's heart skipped a beat and he suddenly became excited. In the past, it was recorded that when a certain kingdom received foreign ambassadors, the princess of the foreign ambassadors had provoked them. In the end, she was severely humiliated by the daughter of a military general with her archery skills, greatly increasing the face of the kingdom. Although he did not know whether this was true or not, this face-slapping was really wonderful. Dawei had a vast territory and many people. Today, there were so many talents in the square. No matter what, the two Yudo would be able to defeat them. Moreover, Dawei had more people. They were thin and upright. Compared to the barbarians, they were pleasing to the eye. For example, Fei Hong and Feng Yun were both first-class handsome men. When they fought, they would definitely make the Yudo feel inferior. Emperor Wen Xian thought about this and said happily, "This is not difficult. The men of Dawei never shrink back. If you choose one of the generals, they will naturally fight." Emperor Wen Xian was not worried that any of the generals would not be able to defeat the Yudo. Firstly, these two Yudo did not even use their weapons and only knew how to use brute force. It was obvious that they were not very skilled. Secondly, if the Yudo were smart, they would not dare to win in front of so many people. After all, the Yudo still wanted to open a market in Dawei. Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "I heard that your majesty bestowed the first female marquis to Dawei." Everyone present was stunned. Emperor Wen Xian was also stunned and said, "That's right. We Yudo have heard of that female marquis fame. I heard that she followed General Feng Yun to the battlefield and is very brave and intelligent. Is she here today?" Emperor Wen Xian frowned slightly. He did not expect that Ma Ningbu would choose He Yan. In this court full of civil and military officials, the Yudo had chosen a woman. How could a woman's physical strength compare to a man's? Although he had heard of He Yan's achievements on the battlefield, he had also seen it with his own eyes. She was just a thin and weak woman. Compared to the two Yudo, they were like a lamb and a black bear. She is a woman. But she is not an ordinary woman. Ma Ningbu smiled and said, "We also have women who know martial arts, but we have never had a woman enter the court as an official. Since she was brought by General Feng Yun, she must be different from ordinary women. Your Majesty," he bowed and said, "please let that female marquis fight with our Yudo." Guang Shuo shook his head. These Yudo were clearly bullying women, or perhaps they were using their position to avenge private wrongs. However, Guang Shuo knew his father's temperament very well. He placed his face above all else. Since he had agreed, he would not go back on his word. Emperor Wen Xian was silent for a moment and said, "Marquis." He Yan stepped forward and bowed. "This subject is here. You can compete with their warriors." There was a moment of silence, then whispers gradually sounded. Lin Shuanghe hurriedly asked his father, "Father, how can you let a woman compete?" Lin Mu said, "Shut up." Xiao Jing was also worried. Yan He nudged Xiao Ju beside him and could not help but say, "Hey, your wife is being forced to do something beyond her ability. How can you still be so calm? Xiao Huijin, you are truly heartless." Xiao Ju ignored him. He Yan stood up and did not respond to the emperor's words. Instead, he looked at Meninbu and asked, "Envoy Meninbu, what do you think of the two great generals of Dawei?" Meninbu looked at the woman in front of him. Before coming to Dawei, He Yan's name had already spread throughout the Yudo kingdom. This woman had fought side by side with Xiao Ju in Jiang City. During the Rundu City War, she had single-handedly caused Huyate to suffer a loss. Even the spy that had been sent into the Liangzhou guards had been discovered by her in the beginning. Xiao Huijin was indeed terrifying, but this woman who had appeared out of nowhere was not simple either. She was just like General Fei Hong He Rufei back in the day. She always had the ability to turn the tide. He Rufei, the mighty eagle, had his wings broken with great difficulty. Was another powerful enemy of the Yudo kingdom about to appear? Even if she was just a woman. A woman who could kill on the battlefield was no longer a woman. In some ways, she had the right to compete with men. Meninbu said, "General Feng Yun and General Fei Hong are both admirable heroes. They are talents that only appear once in 100 years, no, 1,000 years. What a coincidence. This one thinks so too." He Yan smiled. Just like the warriors of the Yudo kingdom come to Dowei and want to spar with the heroes they meet, Hien also has heroes that he admires. If you just want to see my skills, there is no need to spar with me, Lord Maninbu. She said, I specialize in the sword. I cannot display my full strength in wrestling. We can only spar with the sword. I will not spar with you. Emperor Wenxuan's eyes lit up. Hien meant that she wanted to spar with Xiaoju? This was good. She and Xiaoju were about to become husband and wife. If she won, it could be said that Xiaoju went easy on her. If she lost, she would lose to her own people and would not embarrass Dowei. Thinking of this, Emperor Wenxuan immediately said, I approve. I want to see Marquis Wu and skills and choose the category that Marquis Wu specializes in. Marquis Wu, who do you want to spar with? The people who were holding their breaths for Hien heaved a sigh of relief. Emperor Wenxuan said this to give Hien a way out. The officials who were watching the show were also disappointed. Hien naturally chose Xiaoju. A spar between husband and wife could easily produce any result they wanted. Just as everyone was thinking this, Hien walked in front of the generals. She did not stop beside Xiaoju. She walked in front of He Rufei and looked at him. General Fei Hong. She smiled brightly with a hint of sarcasm. I want to see your sword. Chapter 233. The square was dead silent. No one would have thought that the person Hien wanted to compete with was not Xiaoju, but He Rufei. Lin Shuanghe muttered, Is Sister He crazy? Yen He also frowned and asked Xiaoju, What's wrong with her? Why didn't she look for you, but went to He Rufei? Xiaoju did not speak. Her expression was calm, as if she had already expected this scene. He Rufei looked at the woman in front of him. The woman in the official's robes had a smile on her face, and her tone was so matter-of-fact. She clearly looked thin and weak, but he did not know where she got the confidence to compete with him. Did she really think that he was Hien? He sneered in his heart. The woman in front of him looked nothing like Hien in the past. Hien heard that Marquis Wu was frank and cheerful, completely different from his silent cousin. Even if she wanted to act mysterious, shouldn't she have investigated the other party's personality in advance? Such a clumsy imitation with so many loopholes could be seen through at a glance. You want to compete with me? He Rufei slowly said. Everyone in the world says that General Fei Hong's sword is so fast that it can even cut the wind. Hien smiled and said, Unfortunately, I have never seen it. Since there is an opportunity today, Military Governor Xiao, there will be many opportunities to compete with swords in the future. I don't care about this time, but General Fei Hong's sword is not something that can be seen every day. Young Master He, she chuckled, are you willing to compete with me? He Rufei curled his lips, of course, but swords have no eyes. If I lose? He glanced at Xiaoju's direction. Military Governor Xiao won't blame me for this? These words were full of naked provocation. Rumors had it that General Fei Hong and General Feng Yun were natural enemies and had always been at odds. However, rumors were just rumors. No one had ever seen them truly draw their swords at each other's throat. But today it seemed that the rumors were not just rumors. After all, in this situation, even an idiot could see that there was an undercurrent surging. Among the generals, the youth wearing the dark blue official's robes only smiled faintly and said, No, but there should be a prize for competing with swords. Prize? He Rufei asked, how can we use General He's sword for a normal prize? Xiaoju did not wait for He Rufei to finish speaking. Since we are competing with swords, we will use swords as the prize. Hien looked at He Rufei, the owner of Qinglang from now on, the owner of Qinglang. From now on. As soon as these words were spoken, the square immediately boiled over. Is that true? Who would have thought that Military Governor Xiao would bet so much this time? That is Qinglang and Qinglang. He is taking it out for a woman. Isn't he taking it too lightly? I think Military Governor Xiao won't be able to keep Qinglang. No wonder they say that heroes have a weakness for beauties. Looking at Military Governor Xiao's expression, could it be that he has some misunderstanding about his fiancée? That is General Fei Hong. How can he lose to a woman? Emperor Wenxian frowned. He naturally saw the conflict between He Rufei and Xiao Ju. But these two had always minded their own business and lived in harmony for so many years. Since when did their relationship become so bad? Discord between military generals was not a good thing for an imperial dynasty. He Rufei looked at Xiao Ju. Military Governor Xiao, are you sure you want to use your sword as the prize? Not the sword, Xiao Ju said meaningfully, but a sword as well. He Rufei smiled noncommittally. In his opinion, Xiao Ju's words were purely meant to make people laugh. He had heard of He Yan's reputation on the battlefield, but there were many reasons for winning a battle. Perhaps He Yan was clever, but in a one-on-one battle, he was confident that He Yan would not be his match. There would only be one He Yan in the world, and that He Yan was already dead. Since military governor Xiao is so generous, then I will accept. He said, please. Xiao Ju said, what is it? He Rufei turned to look at him. Could it be that military governor Xiao is regretting it? It's not too late to change your mind. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched, and he said mockingly, General He's weapon is one of the best in the world. It's not fair to the opponent. He raised his hand, and autumn wine flew towards He Yan. He Yan caught it firmly. I'll use my autumn wine to compete with you. He Rufei frowned. He Yan smiled. Thank you, military governor. She turned and walked towards the empty space, saying, after you, young master He. He Rufei paused for a moment, then turned and followed her. The officials in the square and the imperial relatives on the Heavenly Star platform all stared at the two people in the square. This was much more thrilling than the wrestling of the two warriors from the Utopia Kingdom. Maningbu also stared at the woman in the red official robes. He hadn't expected He Yan to be unwilling to compete with their judo, and he hadn't expected He Yan to pick He Rufei. It seemed that the discord between the two great generals of Dawei was deeper than they had imagined. Guang Ji whispered to Guang Shuo beside him, fourth brother, isn't this wrong? How can General He bully a woman? Even in Guang Ji's young mind, He Yan as Xiao Ju's fiancé was obviously not as perfect as Shenmu Xue as Xiao Ju's fiancé. However, the rules and principles he had learned since young also taught him that men should not bully women and the weak. Guang Shuo shook his head, let's wait and see. He also couldn't understand. If He Yan chose He Rufei because she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, then not only did Xiao Ju not stop her, she even suggested using her sword as the prize. This was even more confusing. Yan He said in a low voice, Xiao Huaijin, are you crazy? How can He Yan defeat He Rufei? Although He Rufei won't take her life, but if your woman suffers a loss in front of so many people, how could she be willing to accept it in the future? She has just entered the imperial court as an official. If she is defeated by He Rufei's sword here, she will most likely be treated as a joke in the future. She will win, Xiao Ju said. Are you joking? Yan He's eyes widened as he looked at him like he was an idiot. At first, I didn't believe people who said you were blinded by lust. I didn't expect you to be just an ordinary man. No matter how bad He Rufei is, he has practiced the sword more than your woman and has been on the battlefield for a few more years. Even if you don't care about your woman, you should care about your sword. I don't want to help you, I just don't want the two famous swords to fall into He Rufei's hands. I will die of anger. Xiao Ju's voice still carried a bit of indifference. Then you can rest assured that you won't die of anger for now. Yan He was angry. I'm too lazy to talk to you. In the square, He Rufei slowly pulled out Qinglang from his waist. Qinglang was verdant. As soon as it came out of the sheath, he felt the biting cold of the sword. He Yan's gaze froze for a moment. That was her sword. It was the sword that had accompanied her for many years. It was the sword that had watched her grow from an ignorant and inexperienced recruit to a brave and invincible general. During her most difficult times, she had hugged the sword and sat by the frozen river, thinking about her future path. After not seeing it for many years, the sword had finally come out of the sheath, but it was in He Rufei's hands. Gongzi, he has a good sword, she said. What a pity. He Rufei asked, what's a pity? He Yan smiled but did not speak. He suddenly pulled out Autumn drinking sword from his waist. Sword. The two figures tangled together in a split second. Qing Lang was verdant, Autumn Drinking Sword was sparkling and translucent. The swords crossed, one green and one white. It was like the autumn morning in the valley, filled with a desolate chill. The green mountains were faintly discernible, and the trees were filled with autumn colors. The sword's aura caused the sand on the ground to fly in all directions. It was clearly a competition of swords, but it was as moving as a dance. General Fei Hong's swordsmanship was naturally excellent. It was fast and accurate, and had an indomitable aura. What was surprising was that the girl holding Autumn Drinking Sword did not seem to be at a disadvantage when fighting with General Fei Hong's sword. How was this possible? She was just a girl. Although she had been on the battlefield, she was only 16 or 17 years old. How could she be a match for a veteran on the battlefield? Could it be that General Fei Hong was going easy on her? He Rufei's heart flashed with a trace of surprise. Before the competition, He Rufei thought that he had already overestimated He Yan's swordsmanship. But now, it seemed that he had still underestimated it. This girl's swordsmanship was skillful, as if she had practiced swordsmanship since she was a child. The tip of her sword was extremely stable and cunning. She could easily avoid his every attack. And her attacks were not weak at all. Like a storm, they were equally matched. Sometimes, because the girl's body was light, it seemed that she was faster. Lin Shuanghe was stunned. He muttered to himself, "My sister is this powerful?" Although he knew that He Yan was powerful, but every time He Yan fought to the death, he had never seen it with his own eyes. He had only heard about it. And in her opinion, He Yan might be skilled in the art of war, but because of a girl's physical strength, her skills could not be compared to a man's. Moreover, her opponent was He Rufei. He Rufei was a little weak when he was young and studying in the Xianchang school. But later, in Dawei, he was on par with Xiaoju. Lin Shuanghe's heart, which had been in his throat, was now at ease. But what followed was a deeper suspicion. He Yan was so powerful. Didn't that mean that she was at least on par with He Rufei? Did Xiaoju know about this beforehand? Was that why she was so confident and dared to use the Autumn Drinker sword as the prize for this competition for He Yan? Wherever the tip of the sword went, there was actually one person who had been overlooked by everyone. It was Su Zhiheng, who was hiding among the civil officials. Ever since he had seen He Yan at the celebration banquet, Su Zhiheng had felt uneasy. But fortunately, he had not seen He Yan again. Today, when Moningbu mentioned He Yan, Su Zhiheng had a bad premonition. This premonition reached its peak when He Yan proposed to compete with He Rufei. If not for the fact that everyone was standing there obediently and the emperor was watching from the heavenly star platform, Su Zhiheng might have already run away. The woman holding the sword was full of smiles. In an instant, her face overlapped with the face of a certain woman in his memory. Su Zhiheng looked at He Yan, who was fighting with He Rufei, and heard the exclamations of the people around him. He only felt his entire body turn cold. It can't be anyone else, it can only be her. He Yan is back. He Yan used her sword to block He Rufei's sword. Then, with a light leap, she turned around and went behind He Rufei. The Autumn Drinking Sword understood her very well. Although it was Xiaoju's sword, she was able to use it with ease. Her gaze was fixed on He Rufei, and her expression was somewhat cold. He Rufei was imitating her sword moves. Perhaps because He Rufei was afraid that his disguise as General Fei Hong would be exposed, even if he took off his mask, even if he did not go to the battlefield, he still deliberately imitated He Yan's sword moves. In fact, he imitated 80% of He Yan's moves. If he was not very close to He Yan and often saw her use her sword, he was afraid that he would not be able to tell. But, in the end, 20% was missing. And that 20% happened to be the most important 20% for He Yan. 10% came from Xiaoju's guidance when she was young, and 10% came from Master Lu Buwang's teachings. In all fairness, He Rufei's sword moves were not bad. However, as a person who had never been on the battlefield and had never experienced the edge of life and death, his sword energy would always be reserved. He Yan smiled slightly and stabbed her sword towards He Rufei. He Rufei was shocked and used his sword to block. When the two swords collided, the sword did not move, but the person moved. He took 2 steps back. Suddenly, there were low exclamations around. The civil officials did not understand, but the military generals saw it clearly. Someone said, "General Fei Hong is actually at a disadvantage?" He must have been merciful, so Marquis Wuan won. He Yan's smile was like frost. "Young master, he has a good sword, but unfortunately, you don't know how to use it at all." "Arrogant," He Rufei said darkly, turned around and rushed forward. He Yan smiled and leaned back. Qin Lang brushed past her head and cut off a strand of her hair. Her laughing voice resounded throughout the heavenly star platform. "General He, is it because you haven't been on the battlefield for a long time? Even your sword moves are so slow." She hooked her finger and her posture was extremely arrogant. "Can you still lift the sword in your hand?" He Rufei's expression was extremely ugly. The emperor's expression was also ugly. He Rufei's actions were like a slap to Douwei's face. This girl was also insensible. Even if his skills were not bad, he should not be so aggressive. Furthermore, he had only temporarily gained the upper hand. How could she dare to speak so arrogantly? Yenny crossed his arms and watched, frowning. He Rufei's swordsmanship doesn't seem to be very powerful now. However, their swordsmanship looks somewhat similar. His heart moved and he looked at Xiao Ju. "Could it be that you also gave He Yan some advice? You are really like the martial artists on the streets." Yan He was very disdainful. "Everyone can worship you as their teacher. Do you still remember that you are Xiao Huaijin? You are too noisy." Xiao Ju spoke with displeasure. "Ha!" Yan He saw through him. "Why are you pretending to be calm? Are you already worried to death inside? You can't wait to go up and help He Yan compete? However, don't worry. I don't think He Rufei will win. Your girl is right. Maybe it's because he hasn't been on the battlefield for a long time that even his hands are weak. You really are an embarrassment to Xian Changguan." He Yan and He Rufei's swordsmanship competition to this point was already very unexpected. They had originally thought that this sword competition would end very quickly, because putting aside the male and female identities, one was a new recruit who had just made his debut, the other was a brave general who had already achieved success. No matter how they looked at it, it was He Yan who lost. Even if he won, it would be because He Rufei deliberately did so. If He Yan won quickly, it would mean that General Fei Hong was considerate of the girl and did not want to embarrass the girl. This would protect Marquis Wu En's pride. However, He Yan and He Rufei fought for such a long time. After fighting for such a long time, there was still no clear victor. It was impossible that General Fei Hong was deliberately showing mercy. And looking at the reactions of the other generals, He Rufei did not even have the upper hand. Was it because Xiao Huaijin's fiancée was really that powerful? Even He Rufei could not beat her. Or had General Fei Hong's skills deteriorated over the years? Among the crowd, other than Su Zhiheng and He Rufei, the one with the ugliest expression was Su Jingfu. Today's events were really out of Su Jingfu's expectations. Those Yudo were very cunning. They also had private dealings with the Crown Prince Guang Yan. The Guang Yan was short-sighted, narrow-minded, and did not think before doing things. Other than being vicious and merciless, he did not have any of the qualities of a crown prince. Su Jingfu only suspected that the Yudo did not have a backup plan, but the Crown Prince Guang Yan already had a grudge against him. If not for the fact that he had invested so much effort in the Guang Yan over the years, and that he was so close to success, he would have wanted to abandon the darkness and join the light. The Guang Yan had some reservations about him. Ever since the Battle of Jiang, the Yudo had been very dissatisfied with him. But so what? In the Douwei imperial court, he could cover the sky with one hand. Even if the Yudo wanted to do something, they could not do anything. Today, when Ma Ningbu proposed to compete with He Yan, it was out of Su Jingfu's expectations. In the end, the people competing in swords were He Yan and He Rufei. This made him feel that something was not right. He Yan was the daughter of a military officer at the city gate. Everything that he did must have been instructed by Xiao Ju. When Xiao Ju proposed to use swords as the wager, it was clear that he did not have good intentions. Su Jingfu had been rivals with Xiao Ju for so many years. He had watched him grow from a young man who barely held on to the family's lintel to the current right military commander. Sometimes he understood Xiaoju better than he did. He Yen and he had obviously set a trap for He Rufei, and He Rufei had foolishly walked right into it. Or maybe He Rufei did not see through it, but was conceited and did not believe that he would lose to a woman. Everyone was watching He Yen and He Rufei compete in swords. They were amazed that He Yen and He Rufei's swordsmanship was on par. But was that really important? Could it be that Xiaoju did all this just to let his woman humiliate He Rufei in front of all the officials? Su Jingfu did not think so. He Rufei and Xiaoju did not have any enmity before, but He Rufei later sought refuge with him. To show his sincerity, he even sent his confidant to Liangzhou City in an attempt to assassinate Xiaoju. Although he failed in the end, he did not succeed. However, Su Jingfu saw He Rufei's sincerity. He had the support of civil officials, but he also needed a military general. He Rufei appeared at the right time. Although Su Jingfu did not understand why He Rufei chose him, he could clearly protect himself. But later on he thought about it. Officialdom could change a person the most. Even a brave general would willingly offer his sword in the face of greater benefits and a higher position. Su Jingfu's uneasiness was like a ball of thick ink. It wrapped around him in an instant. He looked at He Rufei, who was fighting with the woman on the field, and his heart sank. If something happened to He Rufei, would it implicate him? After all, he and He Rufei had been very close since Yuan Baozhen in Liangzhou City. The tip of the sword carried a murderous aura as it stabbed from behind. However, the person who was stabbed seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He gently leaned to the side and the tip of the sword missed. Young master, He's swordsmanship looks a little familiar. He Yen smiled and said, "But I can only see the shape, not the spirit. How to use this sword?" Her lips curled up with a murderous look. "Do you want me to teach you?" She suddenly turned around and stabbed. With a bang, the tip of the sword pierced He Rufei's chest. However, it only went in a little and did not go any further. "Young master, he actually came to the Heavenly Star platform wearing soft armor?" He Yen said in surprise. "How afraid of death are you to do this? Could it be that you have many enemies and are afraid that someone will come for you midway?" He Rufei sneered. "You talk too much. It's your swordsmanship that is too weak." In terms of provocation, He Rufei really was not He Yan's opponent. When they were in the Liangzhou City Guards, He Yan could provoke every new recruit with just a few words, let alone now. He Rufei also felt mentally strained. This woman's swordsmanship was truly too good. There were no loopholes and he could not find any. On the contrary, she was always able to find his mistakes and see through them at a glance. There were several times when He Yen clearly could have ended the battle quickly, but she did not. She would sometimes cut off a button of his, sometimes cut off a section of his sleeve. She was unhurried, like a cat catching a mouse, making him look inferior to a woman in front of everyone. Inferior to a woman. He was clearly the real He Rufei, clearly the young master of the He family, but he had to live according to He Yan's lifestyle. He lived as if he was He Yan's substitute. In the end, he was still being said that he was inferior to He Yan. Don't think that he could not see that those people were talking and pointing behind his back. The current General Fei Hong could not compare to the previous General Fei Hong. But why did he have to be compared like this? Why did he have to live in someone else's shadow and be inferior to a woman? It was ridiculous. That woman was already a dead person. How could a dead person compare to him? The one who lived to the end was the winner. He held his sword and stabbed at He Yan's back from a tricky angle. This was General Fei Hong's most powerful swordsmanship. He had learned it for a long time. It was said that no one could avoid General Fei Hong's last sword. The tip of the sword was about to pierce the woman's back. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. In the next moment, Yin Qiu accurately parried his sword. The woman in red did not turn her head. Instead, she turned her hand and thrust her sword back. The tip of her sword was swift and fierce. He Rufei was startled. He wanted to dodge, but the woman did not really want to stab him. She jumped behind him and viciously kicked his knee. He Rufei was caught off guard. His knees went soft and he knelt down. He immediately felt a cold sensation on his neck. The woman in red looked down at him with a smile. She silently moved her lips. It was too far away for others to hear, but Rufei saw it clearly. "Big brother," she said, "are you worthy to use my sword?" Chapter 234. In an instant, a chill spread through his limbs and bones. Rufei opened his eyes wide in shock and stared at the woman in front of him. What appeared in his mind was the scene when he first saw Yen for the first time when he returned to the capital. At that time, Yen had already changed back into a woman's clothes. He stood in front of Yen and watched the woman who used his name for many years call him Big Brother. A subtle jealousy and resentment appeared in his heart. How could he not be resentful? He was clearly the real eldest young master but he had been replaced by someone else for many years. If it was said that he was forced by the situation in the past, then when Yen left the He family and stepped onto the path of joining the army, fate had already broken free from everyone's control and rushed towards a future that no one could have predicted. Rufei actually didn't like to practice martial arts, even though his body had already recovered. The He family had never had a general, but because Yen acted on her own, he had to learn the same sword moves as Yen. The same eating habits, the same lifestyle, the same handwriting, the same martial arts, even the same temperament. He and Yen each played the role of the other's substitute. This feeling was so uncomfortable that it finally reached its peak when he returned to the capital and compared himself to others. So he suggested that Yen's eyes be blinded. A blind woman could only be bound to the back residence from then on, unable to make any waves. He also didn't have to worry that one day others would find out that he was different from the original General Feihong, and that his cousin was very similar to General Feihong. However, even if she was blind, Yen didn't fall silent. Yen, who couldn't see the light, was only depressed for a period of time. Later on, Rufei went to the Su family and saw Yen secretly practicing the sword. She was a blind woman who was secretly practicing her sword skills. She seemed to have sensed someone's presence and stopped what she was doing. She asked tentatively, "Is someone here?" Rufei didn't say anything and turned to walk out. When he returned to the He family, he made up his mind that Yen couldn't be left alive. Yen's life was a threat to the He family. It was also a constant reminder to him that he wasn't General Feihong, and he would never be able to compare to General Feihong. Until Yen died, Rufei was finally able to relax. His sword skills were imitations of Yen's, but now, in the hands of this woman, it was as weak as a child's play. The way she looked at him was full of mockery, and the way she called him Big Brother gave him goosebumps. Yen glanced at him and bent down to pick it up with a smile. She looked at Rufei, who was kneeling on the ground after being kicked by her. She smiled and said, "Many thanks to young Master He. The azure sword will be mine in the future." She held a sword in each hand and turned to walk out of the square. Everyone was stunned. This was definitely not something that Rufei could do. A merciful person wouldn't be beaten to the ground by a woman in such a pathetic manner. His kneeling posture was a bit humiliating. He frowned and asked Xiaoju, "Yen and I were talking bad about Rufei. I thought it was to flatter me. Now, it seems that Rufei and she really have a big grudge. Do you know how Rufei offended her?" But before Xiaoju could say anything, he said, "Forget it, I don't want to know." No one in the square spoke. They were all stunned by this result. Who would have thought that General Feihong would be defeated by a woman? Maningbu's eyes moved slightly. Before anyone could say anything, Rufei suddenly jumped up from the ground. He pulled out a dagger and fiercely pounced towards Yen. "Be careful." Lin Shuanghe couldn't help but blurt out. Chu Zhao also couldn't help but look nervous. Yen frowned and dodged. Rufei missed but didn't give up. The dagger in his hands seemed to be shining. It was unknown whether it was tempered with something else, but he continued to close in on Yen. In the next moment, Xiaoju flew forward and reached the square. He casually took autumn wine from Yen's hand and kicked Rufei's dagger away. The tip of the sword brushed past Rufei's neck, leaving a thin line of blood. "If you move again," Xiaoju's eyes were cold. He warned coldly, "I don't mind losing here." The coldness on his neck stimulated He Rufei to come back to his senses. He looked at the man in front of him. Xiao Ju's indifferent eyes completely woke him up. Xiao Ju and He Yen were different. That woman only wanted to scare him, but the man in front of him really wanted to take his life. He Rufei forced a smile. I'm just sparring with Marquis Wu and military governor Xiao is too nervous. Sparring? Xiao Ju's eyes were sharp. He said sarcastically, I didn't think that young master he liked to use sneak attacks when sparring. I also didn't think that young master he was so focused on winning. As soon as he said this, the officials immediately began to discuss. Yes, sneak attacking a woman. That's impolite. If you agree to a bet, you have to accept defeat. That's not how a man should act. But that Marquis Wuen's reaction was really fast. He didn't even succeed. This means that this woman's bravery is not empty words. She really has real skills. Could it be that General He is really inferior to her? Speaking of which, this woman's surname is also He. If she becomes a general in the future, which one do you think will be more powerful? Those who practiced martial arts had outstanding hearing. When He Rufei heard the discussion of the officials, he couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. He felt his head hurt from anger. He Yen was already dead. Why was there another He Yen with the same name? Why was he still inferior to her? On the Heavenly Star platform, Emperor Wen Xian's expression was already very ugly. He originally thought that he would be able to show off a graceful sparring match in front of the Wu Tua emissary. He didn't expect that in the end he would lose face. Not only did He Rufei lose to a woman, he didn't look good. That was fine, but in the end he even tried to sneak attack her. What was this? Today he really made a fool of himself. Yin Qiu still didn't leave his neck. He Rufei's gaze was fixed on He Yen, who was standing behind Xiao Ju. Even though he had thousands of doubts in his heart, in front of everyone and with Xiao Ju in front of him, he could only reluctantly smile and say, I lost. Marquis Wu is indeed a heroine. I was just joking with you. I hope you don't take it to heart. He Yen looked at him and smiled back. It's fine. I didn't take it to heart. He Rufei heaved a sigh of relief. As long as He Yen didn't force him, he could cover up this matter for now. It wouldn't be too late to plot in the future. However, he didn't expect that Xiao Ju and He Yen were already targeting him. Could it be that they had discovered the truth about the assassination attempt on He Yen? He Rufei was just thinking about this when he heard the woman in front of him laugh lightly. But young Master He, why do you still hide a poison dagger when you already have the emerald gem sword? Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just loud enough for everyone in the square to hear. In an instant, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone looked at He Rufei in a different light. Poisoned? Is that true? Why would General Fei Hong carry a poison dagger? He Rufei didn't expect He Yen to suddenly attack. Panic flashed across his face as he reprimanded, What nonsense are you talking about? Is that so? He Yen was still smiling and wasn't angry at all. She smiled and said, Perhaps I saw wrongly. If that's the case, young Master He, do you dare to use the dagger to make a cut on your hand? If it's fine, I'll believe you. There's no poison on the dagger. He Rufei was speechless. The dagger was indeed poisoned. If there was no blood, it would be fine. If there was blood, the poison would quickly seep into the dagger. Within a few steps, one would vomit blood and die. Recently, because of various things, he was uneasy and suspicious. Thus, he carried this dagger with him. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't take it out to hurt others. However, the provocative attitude of this woman in front of him reminded him of He Yen who had passed away. It easily aroused the anger and violence in his heart. Thus, he couldn't help but take action. And now, Xiao Ju actually had something on him. Wait, a trace of shock flashed past his heart. Could it be that He Yen deliberately provoked him from the beginning just for this moment? But how did she know that he was carrying this dagger? He Yen was a woman. Naturally, it was impossible. Then she must be Xiao Ju. Could it be that there was someone in the He family who knew Xiao Ju? He didn't speak for a long time. In the eyes of the crowd, he was guilty. Not to mention other things, Just this competition alone had caused He Rufei's image in the eyes of the officials to plummet. If what He Yan said was true and this dagger was dipped in poison, then when He Rufei took advantage of He Yan's absence to launch a sneak attack, not only was he a sore loser, he was also vicious and vicious. If it wasn't for Xiao Ju, who knew what would have happened? However, was the General Fei Hong of Dawei actually such a person? Emperor Wen Xian only felt that he had lost all his face today. He didn't want to say anything. Su Jingfu stood among the civil officials. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it could drip water. He Rufei was actually so useless. He lost to a woman and was even caught red-handed. Since it was Xiao Ju who made the move, He Rufei probably didn't even know that he had fallen into their trap from the beginning. Su Jingfu pondered in his heart. What was Xiao Ju trying to do by beating around the bush? Lin Shuanghe suddenly spoke. Your Majesty, this commoner will know if young Master He's dagger is poisoned with one look. Why don't you let this commoner take a look to prevent misunderstandings between the two generals? To be honest, Lin Shuanghe didn't have any bad feelings towards He Rufei. He was different from Yan He. He and He Rufei were schoolmates who improved together. Although Lin Shuanghe didn't know what had happened between Xiao Ju and He Rufei, based on his understanding of He Rufei, she shouldn't be the kind of vicious person who would sneak attack someone from behind. There might be some misunderstanding between them. At this time, he still hoped that Xiao Ju and He Rufei could mend their relationship. At least, they didn't need to be at daggers drawn. He thought that he had good intentions. However, He Rufei paused for a moment and gritted his teeth. No need. This dagger is indeed poisoned. The officials were in an uproar. Emperor Wen Xian said angrily, He Rufei, why did you bring a poisoned dagger to the Heavenly Star platform? When He Rufei heard these words, he immediately knelt down and bowed towards Emperor Wen Xian. He raised his head and said, Your Majesty, these few days, Shu'er City hasn't been peaceful. A few days ago, I was attacked by assassins. Not long ago, my residence was attacked by thieves. I suspected that someone was trying to harm me. In order to prevent any accidents, I hid a dagger in my clothes. However, today, I was anxious to spar with Marquis Wuan and forgot that the dagger was inappropriate. I'm sorry, please punish me. He Yan looked at his fluent lie and couldn't help but raise his brows. He Rufei was also a talent. He thought of an excuse in such a short time. Although this excuse was forced, it was still an excuse. When Su Jingfu saw the situation, he stepped out and said, Your Majesty, I've also heard about the theft from General He's residence. Although it was inappropriate to carry a dagger, it wasn't a crime worthy of death. Today's banquet on the Heavenly Star platform is not suitable to see blood. I hope Your Majesty can be lenient. However, General He's actions were indeed dangerous. If he was careless and injured Mark Wuan, I'm afraid that Military Governor Xiao would fly into a rage. He said these words lightly and with a bit of ridicule. It was obvious that he wanted to help He Rufei turn the matter into a small one. After all, He Rufei had many connections with him in the dark. If something really happened to He Rufei, it wouldn't be good for him to be implicated. Su Jingfu looked at He Yan and smiled. I'm afraid that Marquis Wuan was quite frightened. Everyone looked at Su Jingfu and Xiao Ju. The two of them were sworn enemies and everyone in the court knew that. Xiao Ju was cruel and heartless, everyone knew that. However, his fiancée, and Marquis, was always smiling. She was also gentle and had a sense of propriety when conversing with others. She seemed to be an easy person to talk to. Moreover, in front of so many people, if He Yan continued to be unforgiving and aggressive, not only would it make her seem unreasonable as a woman, it would also make Emperor Wen Xian unhappy. After all, this was considered a family scandal. It was best not to blow it up in front of outsiders. Su Jingfu gave him a way out. Emperor Wen Xian was happy to speak and reprimanded, He Rufei, hurry up and apologize to Mark Wuan. He Rufei hurriedly saluted He Yan and said, I'm sorry, Mark Wuan. Just now, I was too competitive and almost hurt Miss He. Fortunately, Miss He is fine. Although he was speaking to He Yan, his gaze was fixed on Xiao Ju who was beside He Yan. In He Rufei's opinion, He Yan's actions must have been incited by Xiao Ju. He wasn't worried about He Yan, but he couldn't help but be afraid of Xiaoju. However, He Rufei was also somewhat proud of himself. So what if she was Xiaoju? Once Emperor Wen Xian spoke, no matter how dissatisfied he was, he could only drop the matter. Prime Minister Su was still the best. It was worth it for him to lose a trusted aide and form a relationship with Su Jingfu. Just as he was thinking this, he saw the Dawei's right army commander standing in front of him. He lowered his eyes and looked at him with silent mockery, as if he was looking at a clown. He Rufei's heart was immediately filled with anger. Before he could speak, He Yan spoke. He Yan said, "Young Master He, you don't need to apologize to me. After all, you didn't really hurt me. If you had hurt His Majesty today, young Master He would have died." He Rufei's expression changed. "What did you say?" He subconsciously looked at the Emperor on the heavenly star platform. "I said." He Yan bent down to pick up the dagger that He Rufei had dropped. He played with it in his hand and then looked at him. He slowly said, "Young Master He, you did everything possible to hide a dagger on your body. Was it really to hurt me? I'm just a woman. Why would young Master He do this? The person that young Master He really wants to hurt is His Majesty." At the end of his words, his voice was as sharp as a knife. Everyone present couldn't help but tremble in fear. "He Yan." He Rufei didn't wait for her to continue and sternly interrupted He Yan, "Don't make slanderous accusations. You are framing me, Your Majesty." He hurriedly looked at Emperor Wen Xian and cried out, "This subject does not have such malicious intentions. I don't know how this subject offended Marquis Wu In or Military Governor Xiao. They actually want to frame this subject for injustice." Su Jingfu also didn't expect that He Yan would directly accuse He Rufei of regicide. Hearing this, he hurriedly said, "Ma Wuan, you can't speak carelessly. General, he only accidentally injured you during a spar. Why do you have to force him to his death?" "Your Majesty, this subject followed the Fuyue army to quell the rebellion. I only wish for the Dawei to prosper and its people to be at peace. This subject's lifelong wish is to protect Dawei's land for Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please believe in this subject's loyalty." He Rufei shouted. Ma Ningbu's eyes widened slightly. He really didn't expect this to happen. This was very interesting. Although He Rufei had cooperated with the Yudo didn't truly trust him. After all, He Rufei's methods of leading troops were obvious to all. If the two great generals of Dawei joined forces, it would definitely not be a good thing for the Yudo kingdom. Now that they were fighting, as long as one of Emperor Wenshuan's arms was broken, a hole would be torn in Dawei. He didn't intend to speak. The emperor sat on the high throne and looked at his subjects who kept kowtowing with a strange expression. Although he was a mediocre emperor and wasn't good at court affairs, he still had the natural trait of an emperor. He was suspicious. It would have been better if he didn't mention it. Once a seed was planted, the way he looked at people changed. On the other hand, when the generals heard He Rufei's words, they couldn't help but speak up for He Rufei. "That's right. General, he disregarded his own life in order to quell the rebellion in Xichang. His loyalty is obvious to all. How could he have the intention to harm Your Majesty? Marquis Wu En's words are too much. If he really had the intention to harm Your Majesty, why would he risk his life to fight a war? I heard the people in the barracks say that General Fei Hong is loyal and unafraid of death. He's definitely not someone like that." All sorts of discussions entered He Yan's ears. He Yan smiled faintly and declined to comment. Only when the scene gradually quieted down did she open her mouth and slowly say, "General Fei Hong is loyal to the country, majestic and awe-inspiring, riding alone against 1,000, unparalleled in the world. Of course, he wouldn't commit treason and regicide. But," she smiled and looked at He Rufei, her eyes gradually turning cold. "Young Master He, are you General Fei Hong?" He Rufei felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The woman in front of him looked at him with a cold smile. Her gaze was so disdainful, as if she was looking at an insignificant ant. She looked down on him. Chu Zhao was stunned. Someone beside him muttered, "What does Marquis Wu Wen mean? What do you mean by General He is General Fei Hong?" "Of course, General He is General Fei Hong." Yan He frowned and looked at He Rufei with a questioning gaze. He Rufei said, "What did you say?" "I say," this time without waiting for him to finish, He Yen interrupted him first. "He Gongzi, after pretending to be General Fei Hong for so long, aren't you tired? I think it's time for you to take off this mask," she said lightly. The Heavenly Star platform instantly became lively. Even if Emperor Wen Xian was present, he couldn't control the development of the situation. He Rufei felt as if he had been stripped naked and thrown out in broad daylight. The sun was so glaring that he couldn't open his eyes. Su Zhiheng also felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His legs were trembling and his eyes were full of fear. There was only one thought in his mind. Run, run. But just as he was about to move, he realized that his legs were weak and he didn't have the strength to move. "What nonsense are you talking about?" He Rufei forced himself to maintain his composure and said hatefully, "Is Marquis Wuan crazy? Pretending to be General Fei Hong? What mask? His Majesty personally conferred me the title of General Fei Hong. How can it be fake? If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. I thought that Marquis Wu An was a heroine with a broad mind. I didn't expect her to be so narrow-minded. If I had known, I wouldn't have competed with you. What's the point of saying these things now?" He Yen looked down at him. "You've been pretending to be General Fei Hong for so long, but you haven't learned anything from her. General Fei Hong dares to take responsibility for her actions. What about you? You've already done it. Why don't you dare to admit it now?" Marquis Wu An, Emperor Wen Xuan looked at He Yen with an unfathomable gaze. "What do you mean by that?" "Your Majesty," He Yen saluted Emperor Wen Xuan. "General Fei Hong won't betray the Wei or your Majesty. But young master he will. This young master he isn't the real General Fei Hong. You're talking nonsense." He Rufei couldn't help but say, "I'm not General Fei Hong." "Who is General Fei Hong?" He Yan's lips curled up. His tone was so gentle that it was almost strange. "Young master he, have you really forgotten about your cousin who accidentally drowned?" As soon as he said this, the entire place fell silent. Su Zhiheng almost fainted. Su Jingfu's face was pale. Emperor Wen Xuan clutched his chest and coughed several times. The eunuch beside him hurriedly handed him a handkerchief to massage his chest. Emperor Wen Xuan finally said, "He Yen, do you know what you're saying? What Wutanvoy? What sword dance?" None of that mattered now. Emperor Wen Xuan stared intently at He Rufei on the ground. He Yan's words just now, with just a little bit of thought, he could understand what she was talking about. However, no one was discussing it at this moment. It was simply too shocking. Wei Xuanzhang's eyes widened in disbelief. Yan He's brows were tightly knitted. Lin Shuanghe stared blankly at He Rufei, unable to accept what he had just heard. "Your Majesty!" Xiao Ju, who had been quiet all this time, finally stepped forward. He glanced at He Rufei before saying, "Young master he isn't General Fei Hong. Or rather, the General Fei Hong who led the Fuyue army to quell the Western Chang rebellion and the General Fei Hong who returned to the capital to receive his reward are not the same person. This young master he doesn't know how to fight. He only knows how to receive rewards." Everyone on the Heavenly Star platform fell silent. Emperor Wen Xuan's voice contained restrained anger. "Do you have proof?" Xiao Ju smiled. Chapter 235. On the high seat, the emperor looked at the letter in the hands of the palace servant and did not speak for a long time. He Rufei's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by an invisible hand, gripping it so tightly that his heart ached. At this point, he was certain that the thief who broke into the He family that night and stole the letter in the exquisite box was Xiao Ju. But how did Xiao Ju know how to open the exquisite box? She could enter and leave the He family as if no one was there. If there was no spy who tipped her off, could it be? He looked at He Yen and vaguely remembered that when he was sparring with this woman, she called him Big Brother. It contained a myriad of emotions, like a malicious spirit that came to collect debts. Could it be that she really, the real General Fei Hong, was once a classmate of this official at the Xianchang Pavilion? Xiao Ju said, after the Battle of Hua Yuan, this official found that there was something suspicious about General Fei Hong's identity. After returning to the capital, this official went to the Xianchang Pavilion. Someone set fire to the Xianchang Pavilion's library and attempted to burn General Fei Hong's old handwritten notes. Xiao Ju said in a low voice. Fortunately, the arson was unsuccessful. This official compared the handwritten notes of the Xianchang Pavilion with the military books that General Fei Hong once read. The handwriting is the same. But young Master He's handwriting is not similar. Just based on this point, how can you prove General Fei Hong's identity? Su Jingfu slowly opened his mouth and stared at Xiao Ju with an unfathomable gaze. A person's handwriting will not always be the same. With the passage of time, it is not impossible for it to change. He never thought that Xiao Ju would beat around the bush to talk about this matter. This matter sounded so ridiculous that it made people laugh. He Rufei's cousin was the real General Fei Hong and He Rufei was just a fake who took over the family's home? How was this possible? No one even knew the name of He Rufei's cousin, let alone a woman. How could she have such great ability? He thought that Xiao Huijin was joking, but when he saw He Rufei's expression, he was shocked. In an instant, many things that he didn't understand in the past suddenly became clear. He Rufei was quite famous among the generals, and did not rely on the support of a civil official like him. Even if he wanted to take part in the competition for the throne, he would not be in a hurry. Why was he in such a hurry to cooperate with him? Instead, it seemed like he wanted to use him to hide something. Although Su Jingfu had his suspicions, he ordered people to investigate and found nothing, so he temporarily dispelled his suspicions. Now it seemed that Xiao Ju was telling the truth. Although he didn't know how Xiao Ju knew about these secrets, if something really happened to He Rufei, it would be bad for him. Thinking of this, no matter how unwilling he was, Su Jingfu could only speak up for He Rufei at this juncture. This is only one of the pieces of evidence. Xiao Ju calmly said, "Bring a witness." Someone was brought to the square by the imperial guards. It was a woman. She was very timid, and when she saw so many people in the square, she was so scared that she fell to the ground. "Madame Jiang," Xiao Ju said, "in front of the emperor, tell him everything you know without missing a single word." Su Zhiheng's face was as white as paper, and he was on the verge of collapsing. He had been looking for Mother Jiang's whereabouts all this time. Before, he had already heard the news, but the people he sent out were all empty-handed. Later, because of Fu Wang, he thought that He Rufei had found Mother Jiang. He Rufei wanted to use Mother Jiang to threaten him, but he never thought that Mother Jiang had been found by Xiao Ju. When Mother Jiang saw the emperor, she was so scared that she kowtowed again and again, tears almost falling out. Your Majesty, this humble woman really doesn't know anything. This humble woman is serving Su family's Yinyang." That day, Yinyang said that she wanted to kill young mistress. It was eldest master's idea. This humble woman only dared to watch from afar. They pressed young mistress into the water and suffocated her to death. This humble woman heard Yinyang call young mistress General He. Young mistress' eyes were also blinded by them. This humble woman didn't do anything. This humble woman really doesn't know anything. Heavens! What does this woman mean? The drowned young mistress, Su, was the real General Fei Hong, and they killed her to silence her? So, eldest master Su also knows about this? But isn't eldest master Su deeply in love with his deceased wife? What kind of deeply in love is this? It's simply hair-raising. Lin Shuanghe muttered, "Brother He, is young mistress Su?" Yan He also couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes, wondering if he was dreaming. Wei Xianzhang was pushed by his colleague beside him. "Teacher Wei, so the General He in your school back then was actually a woman? Didn't you notice?" Wei Xianzhang didn't speak, his mind filled with disbelief. He Rufei back then, he didn't like He Rufei very much. If it wasn't for Shibao's pleading, he wouldn't have allowed him to enter the school in the first place. That youth was diligent and eager to learn, but unfortunately, he didn't have any talent in academics. In terms of martial arts, he wasn't outstanding either. The Xianchang school nurtured the future talents of Dewei. For such an ordinary person, it was fine to go to an ordinary school. However, He Rufei later led the Fuyue army to fight the Western Chang people, which made him look at him in a new light. Those who could protect their country were all good men. Now that he thought about it, He Rufei had already shown a different side of him when he was in the Xianchong school. For example, he wore a mask all day long and was always alone. The teachers had always thought that he felt inferior because of his ugly appearance, but now they all understood. It turned out that the clumsy and hardworking youth was a girl. He was afraid of being discovered, so he had always been alone. He couldn't describe the feeling in his heart. Wei Xianzhang had always thought that women should stay at home to help their husbands and children and shouldn't show their faces in public. The women had long hair and short knowledge, but now, they couldn't say anything harsh. They only felt that the deceased General Fei Hong was respectable and pitiful. Fifth Prince Guang Shui quietly pulled the Guang Shua beside him. Fourth brother, why don't I understand what they're saying? What happened to General Fei Hong? Guang Shui suppressed the surprise in his heart and said, nothing. He looked at He Rufei kneeling in front of the emperor and sighed in his heart. He remembered He Rufei. He Rufei had become famous in the Fuyue army. Later, it was discovered that he was the eldest son of the He family and everyone in the court praised him. For a young master of a good family to go to war, it was something that required courage. Moreover, General Fei Hong's heroic appearance was legendary among his subordinates. He also admired him. But now, Xiao Ju had revealed the truth of this matter. The brave general who disregarded his own life and charged on the battlefield was actually a weak girl under the armor. After winning the war, the merits weren't hers, the praise wasn't hers, and even her identity wasn't hers. In the end, she died under the conspiracy of her own family. Hearing this, people felt that the heavens were cruel. The emperor's gaze was heavy as he looked at the civil officials. Su Zhiheng, you also knew about this matter? No, this official was wrongly accused. Su Zhiheng's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. It was this bitch who slandered me. I'm her master. Her master, He Wanru, was jealous of Foreign and secretly harmed Foreign, causing Foreign to drown. When this official found out about this matter, I killed He Wanru to avenge Foreign. However, this official never knew that Foreign was General Fei Hong. This official really didn't know. His tears flowed down his face and he spoke with great sincerity. Anyone who saw him would feel that this person was innocent. He Yen coldly looked at Su Zhiheng's hypocrisy. Suddenly, he felt that this spineless man in front of him was completely different from the green-clothed youth he met at the hunting grounds. The crown prince couldn't help but say, Military Governor Xiao, you can't just convict General He based on a few notes and a few words from a servant, right? This is De Wei's General Fei Hong. Moreover, isn't the truth you're saying a bit too outrageous? How can a woman be so powerful? Guang Yan didn't have any dealings with He Rufei, but he knew that He Rufei seemed to have some relationship with Prime Minister Su. At this moment, he spoke up for He Rufei, not for He Rufei or Prime Minister Su, but to shut Xiao Ju's mouth. After all, Xiao Ju was his enemy and not his friend. Of course, it's impossible to convict eldest young master He based on this alone. Moreover, his eyes were filled with mockery. Eldest young master He's crimes aren't limited to this. Guang Yan was stunned. Su Jingfu knew that this was bad. He heard Xiao Ju say, He Rufei colluded with the enemy and committed treason. In order to prevent his identity from being exposed, he secretly colluded with the Yudo during the Battle of Huayuan. He didn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of De Wei's soldiers in exchange for the Yudo's mercy. Ma Ningbu had been watching the show from the sidelines. He never thought that this fire would suddenly burn in front of him. He was so shocked that his expression changed slightly. No one spoke. The cold wind in the square whistled through the fluttering flags. It was as if the wronged souls of those who died on the battlefield had finally arrived at the table to plead their grievances. He Rufei, Xiao Ju sneered, you're such a coward. Military Governor Xiao, some things can't be said without clarifying the situation, Su Jingfu said. Xiao Ju was unmoved. He only ordered his subordinates to present the evidence to the emperor. Eldest young master He's residence was robbed. It said that antiques and cultural relics were stolen. It's just a small amount of money, but the He family panicked and searched the entire city for the thief. Xiao Ju said faintly. Why? Because eldest young master, he himself knows that once the stolen items are made public, his reputation will be ruined. He Rufei gritted his teeth and said, You, 3 letters. The young man had already turned to the emperor. 2 of them are from the Yuto. The last one, he glanced at Su Jingfu and smiled, is from Prime Minister Su. Emperor Wenshuan suddenly looked up. If the previous incident with He Rufei only gave him shock and disbelief, then Xiao Ju's last sentence made him feel a great sense of anger and betrayal. Su Jingfu and Yudo? He was a mediocre emperor. He liked to be a hands-off boss, but that didn't mean that he liked to be played by others. This trampled on the dignity of the emperor's family. How could he tolerate this? Su Jingfu was stunned. He subconsciously knelt down and said, Your Majesty, I'm not disloyal. I don't know where military governor Xiao got these forged letters from to slander me like this. My loyalty to your Majesty can be seen by heaven and earth. He didn't know where Xiao Ju got the letters from, nor did he know when He Rufei hid them. He didn't think too much about He Rufei. A rude and unreasonable general wasn't worth the effort. But it was his carelessness that pushed him into the fire pit. He Rufei actually kept a card up his sleeve. He didn't know where he got this letter from, but he didn't destroy it. And it was found out by Xiao Ju. Emperor Wenshuan looked at the letter in his hand. The more he read, the darker his face became. In the end, there was no expression on his face. He already knew in his heart whether the letter was real or not. For so many years, Su Jingfu had been by his side, but he had always turned a blind eye. It was all because of Su Jingfu's assistance when he first ascended the throne. He thought that he was a humane emperor, different from the previous emperors. But now, it seemed that the relationship between the emperor and his subjects was not worth mentioning in the eyes of some people. He gave Su Jingfu power and status, but he was still not satisfied. When he heard the words, betray the country, the way he looked at Su Jingfu was no longer friendly. Military Governor Xiao. Among the generals, He suddenly asked loudly, He Rufei really abandoned the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers in the Battle of Huayuan for his own selfish desires? Xiao Ju didn't say anything. He just looked at him calmly. He's eyes instantly turned red. Generals were different from scholars. They were on the battlefield and carried swords and spears. They were brothers and comrades who went through fire and water on the battlefield. Their emotions were different from others. When military generals fought, they wished they could protect as many people as possible. What they hated the most was meaningless sacrifice. Yet, there was actually such a bastard who would betray his own people and watch them die. All he wanted was his own cheap life. He took a deep breath and stood out. He knelt down in front of Emperor Wenshuan. Your Majesty, please punish He Rufei severely. Take revenge for the innocent soldiers who died in the Battle of Huayuan. The generals were shocked at first, then they fell silent. Finally, they put down their swords and spears and knelt down as well. Your Majesty, please punish He Rufei severely and take revenge for the innocent soldiers who died in the Battle of Huayuan. Their shouts shook the heavens. Ma Ningbu knew something was wrong. He looked at Emperor Wenshuan again and was also shocked. Xiao Ju said coldly, the Yudo secretly colluded with the officials in the imperial court, causing the people in Huayuan to be plunged into misery and suffering. The soldiers died in vain. Now, they are pretending to ask for peace, but in reality, they are harboring evil intentions. Your Majesty, Xiao Ju bowed and saluted, the Yudo's ambitions are clear as day. Your Majesty, please retract your order for peace. As for opening a market in Dawei, that is even more impossible. The most important thing now is to eliminate the officials in the Qing dynasty who are in cahoots with the Yudo. Su Jingfu reprimanded, Xiao Huaijin, you are slandering me. The innocent will be innocent. Prime Minister Su, there is no need to be agitated. Xiao Ju didn't give him a look and looked directly at Emperor Wenshuan. Your Majesty, please retract your order. Emperor Wenshuan suddenly felt exhausted. After being the emperor for so many years, there were not many relaxing days. Most of the time, he was exhausted. However, there had never been a time like today, when he felt that he was really old. He was so old that even sitting on this throne felt too high and too cold. Imperial father, the fourth Prince Guang Shua, who had been silent all this time, finally stood up and said to Emperor Wenshuan, regardless of whether military governor Zhao's words are true or false, at this time, we must renegotiate our relationship with the Yudo kingdom. As for eldest young master He and official Su, before the truth is revealed, we can't let them go. The General Fei Hong incident is no small matter. If what military governor Xiao said is true, everyone involved in this incident will not be able to escape responsibility. These words included Su Jingfu. Su Jingfu felt a sweetness in his throat. He felt a lump of air in his chest that made him want to vomit blood. The fourth Prince Guang Shua had always been well behaved. Although he supported the Crown Princes Guang Yen and was wary of Guang Shua, in Su Jingfu's heart, Guang Shua definitely didn't have the guts to fight for the throne. If he did, he wouldn't have dragged it out until now. Guang Shua's temperament was similar to Emperor Wenshuan's, with a bit of the useless benevolence of Guang Yen. Therefore, he was destined to be inferior to Guang Yen. At this moment, Guang Shua's words would be the last straw that broke the camel's back. As expected, Emperor Wenshuan glanced at Guang Shua. At this juncture, he didn't hate Guang Shua for meddling in political affairs. Instead, he felt that Guang Shua's words seemed to provide a solution to the current situation, waking him up from the malice of being betrayed. Su Jingfu looked at Emperor Wenshuan's expression and knew that things weren't good. If Emperor Wenshuan spoke at this moment and accepted Guang Shua's words, then He Rufei wouldn't have a chance to make a comeback. He Rufei wouldn't have a chance to make a comeback. That letter would become the evidence that would nail him to death. He couldn't be taken away at this time, leaving only one Guang Yen outside. That idiot Guang Yen wouldn't be able to get him out. And Xiao Huaijin wouldn't let go of this opportunity. After today, he would have no chance to make a comeback. Your Majesty! Su Jingfu's tears flowed down his old face. This old subject has been wronged. This old subject believes that military governor Zhao's words aren't true at all. They're all nonsense. It said that General Fei Hong and General Feng Yun don't get along. Now it seems that it's true. However, this old subject doesn't know how General He provoked military governor Xiao to make military governor Xiao do such a thing. Even at this time, he still didn't give up. Military Governor Xiao didn't lie. A woman's voice suddenly rang out. It was sharp and ear-piercing. He Yen was startled. He turned around and saw a woman stumbling over from the crowd. This woman's clothes were dirty, as if she had rolled around somewhere. He didn't know where she came from. Her hair was also disheveled, but her face was beautiful. It was actually Madame He. He Yen was stunned. He wanted to go forward, but he was afraid of being found out, so he could only stand there. Xiao Ju was also surprised. He Rufei was shocked. Madame He didn't even look at the crowd. She rushed to the bottom of the Heavenly Star stage and prostrated herself in front of Emperor Wenxian. She loudly said, "This old subject can testify. Your Majesty, this old subject can testify. He Rufei isn't General Fei Hong at all. He's a fake. He Rufei was born with my daughter, but his body was weak. The doctor said that He Rufei wouldn't live past 3 years old. My husband and eldest brother let my daughter, He Yen, dress up as a man and exchange identities with He Rufei." He Yan's hands were slightly trembling. "Madam," he crawled forward 2 steps. "My daughter went to the battlefield when she was 16 years old. She was lucky enough to obtain military merits. When she returned to the capital, He Rufei's body had already recovered. When His Majesty appointed generals, He Yen and He Rufei had already returned to their respective places. This wasn't a big deal." She took a deep breath and pointed at He Rufei, who was not far away, but they were crazy. In order to prevent their identities from being exposed, they fed my daughter poison. First, they poisoned her eyes, then they drowned her in the pond. "Military Governor Xiao didn't lie to you, Your Majesty," Madam He shouted. "My daughter, He Yen, is the real General Fei Hong." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.